Hey, how you doing? 1 second. So, the rarest of rare Dynasty grind streams, Zach Reed, the man on the couch, is not going to be able to make it tonight. The least rare of rare things is that Dynasty Outhouse is once again not here. That just leaves you all with me. So I know what to tell you. Good luck with that. No one else has fared very well, but maybe you've got the stuff. I don't know. But that having been said, we live stream every Wednesday, 9:30 till when we get bored, tired, or run out of questions. And that includes today. So here I am. That was anticlimactic. Yeah, what's up? It's just me. So hopefully you all don't have many questions or something tonight, or maybe you have a lot because I don't have anyone to talk to in the meantime. Just me chilling in the off season. It's training camp season though, so actually Twitter's been alive with pieces of information and takes that I not only don't agree with, but also don't much care about. I think we garner about as much information from training camp as we do from, reading tea leaves, to be honest with you. Although it is fun to see the Sky Moore Hive and others get a chance to finally have something positive to report on instead of, it happened that one time, maybe once, kind of a little bit. Hey, Slow by Wade. Howdy. 24 first and Burks, too much to give for Waddle. No, I would say that's too little to give for Waddle. If you can get Waddle for that much, that'd be pretty good. I have high expectations for Burks this year, Hopkins or not. Burks should be able to earn target share like he was doing whenever he was healthy enough to garner 70% of snaps last year. That's one of the reasons I'll give him an excuse. Also, a really solid college profile that had me rate him as the wide receiver 1 last year. But some of that's just hope chess, This is still a significant risk. He's still a maybe. He's still a maybe boat. He's still the mystery box, not yet the boat, according to the Peter Griffin meme, whereas Waddle is the boat. He's a full-on, full-blown top 12 wide receiver twice, only 2-3 years into his career. So, yeah, the way that I remember Zach saying it a few different times about Amon-Ra St. Brown and Jordan Addison as well. He likes Jordan Addison a lot, and so do I. Amon-Ra St. Brown, we're hoping he can do some approximation of what Amon-Ra St. Brown already is. And so you just have to lean the vet there. And the random, or even if it's a high 24 first, doesn't do much to change my mind on that. I mean, that is just pure hope chase. It's just purely something we hope turns into something even as hopeful as Burks. So first is never going to sway me off a trade like that. Waddle, he's in a tier with CeeDee Lamb, AJ Brown, where they're not really worth 3 firsts, but they're not really worth 2 firsts, which is essentially what you've been offered or what you're offering in return for someone in that category right here. So I would lean the veteran. Thanks very much. Appreciate it. I wish I could waffle on about that a while longer, but that's as much as I've got. My Discord's actually been popping lately. I realize I haven't been checking in on it nearly as often as I used to, where we've been recording the Rate My League shows and everything else. We've sold all 15 of those, by the way, now. So I asked to expand it a little bit, and they expanded it to 16, which immediately sold. So yeah, we're out of those. We're thinking about doing more, but so far we're sold out. But anyway, what else was I going to say? Doing the Rate My League shows. Where are they going to go? Completely forgot. Oh yeah, that's what's kept me busy. So I haven't been checking in on my Discord as much, or been keeping up with my articles and other stuff nearly as well. Outside of the Dynasty Grind, my podcast last week was 3 days late. I just published this week's podcast like 2 days after I published last week's podcast. So that's a bit of a bad luck, but they all did get published. Just saying. And I skipped out because I completely blanked on it on my article for this week about ranks and what they might be showing us in some small regard. But But yeah, that's been my mentality this week. It's where I'm at, mostly behind schedule. I'm feeling it. Although I did just pick up 2 new articles to write for the month of August, so that should probably help, along with the extra 5 or 6 shows that we've got to do for Rate My League still. Hey, Slater son. Hey, first startup and first Superflex coming up soon. Same league. Congrats, man. That's awesome. Have pick 11 with third round reversal. So Scott Fish similarity there. And no one is interested in trading. That happens a lot. It's something to note about your league, though. Startups can be different than, day-to-day play or the off-season. Any tips on how to zig since all the elite quarterbacks will be gone? Zigging when other people zagging. That's a forever suggestion. What I have found, one thing I'd mark it out. I'd look at the ADP 12 sections, predict the third round reversal. Something I did for the Scott Fishbowl draft sheet, so you could just use that and reconvert it into actual ADP just to get a sense of who is available. I haven't done a lot of mocks and drafts this offseason. What I find with the end of the first round is you're falling into a place where running backs tend to be the better pick at that level of draft pick. So towards the end of this, in a dynasty draft early on, you've got the quarterbacks, to your point, all 7 are going to go through the first 7 picks. And that will tell you that the ADP is following quarterback value at least relatively closely, if that happens, which means you can expect the rest of the quarterbacks to fall in similar fashion to ADP, which gives you some estimation of how much you can trust the ADP, at least in terms of quarterbacks. I always like to make that gambit as well. But then you've got the wide receivers, Justin Jefferson, Jamar Chase are going to go, and then maybe a Kyle Pitts. Someone will throw that out occasionally, which means by the time you get to the end of the first round, the best players on the board are whoever your running back 1, 2, and 3 is. The second option, especially with that third round reversal, and that's kind of where I'd lean, is to snag 2 of those second ranked wide receivers. So you get Jalen Waddle, if he's your guy, like he is for me, or CeeDee Lamb, if he's your guy, he's in that tier as well. And AJ Brown on the reverse. Being on the 11th pick is actually, I do actually like being on the corners. I don't actually think it provides an advantage. It's just I get to do more with my team quicker, and I like that feeling. And so I like to double tap or overstack on positions when I'm on the turn. But again, you're going to have to see how your draft goes. But on that turn, if I can get CeeDee Lamb, T. Higgins, or Jalen Waddle, T. Higgins, or CeeDee Lamb, and 2 of those guys, AJ Brown's another good one, that's a really good turn in Dynasty, where you've got that third round reversal, because that's pretty much the only choice you're going to make. And then it's going to come back to you 12 picks earlier than it normally would, which means you're going to get a bite at that second tier of quarterbacks right there, because it reverses by the time the third round comes up. And so your third pick is actually going to be a lot higher than ADP thinks, or in most leagues. And that's why I saw it work out in the Scott Fishbowl, and it worked fairly successfully. But again, you have to watch your draft. For example, there's Dak Prescott in that second tier of quarterbacks. Sometimes people will snag him earlier, but he could fall to you in the third round where you've got the reversal going on. But your priorities remain the same. The reason I say keep reading is read your draft is because the priority list in Dynasty is fairly simple, especially in a Superflex. It's quarterbacks, top 5 difference-making quarterbacks, and then the underrated for some reason, like the Dak Prescott. He's in that tier, but he's somewhat boring, so it's too expensive to trade for or trade away. But in a dynasty startup, I care less about that. I just got a quarterback with top 5 upside, less than the other quarterbacks with top 5 upside that have been drafted in this draft, and he's going to play for another 3-4 years. I'm fine. And so that's the kind of quarterback that I really like, getting a slight discount. But if you're looking at your draft and you think you can grab him in that third round, it'd be really great to tap the second priority of a dynasty league, which is young wide receivers. Not young because they're young, like Jordan Addison or Burks, but someone like Garrett Wilson, someone like CeeDee Lamb, Jalen Waddle, in that tier, proven good and are young. And that's the second dynasty priority. If you can get those things all tied up, I actually just produced a podcast with Justin Boone from The Score, and that's what he said. His focus going into a startup is that, especially in a Superflex league, which is the thing he only plays, you want to get a good quarterback, just the one. Dak Prescott is fine. Obviously, you're hoping for Herbert, you're hoping for Burrow, but where you've got pick 11, that's out of your realm. But if you can snag one of those guys in that third round reversal, that's the best, because then you can snag the second priority, because there's a good quarterback, then there's startable number of young, good wide receivers. And the rest of it, as much as we like to talk about it like it's complicated or difficult, you honestly have time to figure out the rest of it, even if that's the only thing you hit on after your startup draft. If you've got a good quarterback in a super flex and 3 good wide receivers that have a few years left at least, then you're good. You can figure out the rest. You can get Hopkins late, you can get Keenan Allen late, you can get Michael Thomas late to fill out those flex spots or have upside at value, or you can take your shots on Rashad Bateman as someone I like, or Rondon Moore at the wide receiver position later. But after you've got those things set, you can just take shots on running back until you find those wide receivers or tight ends that you really want. Me, a priority this year is George Kittle. Just at the tight end position, I think he's like a Dak Prescott of the tight end world, where he's got that upside. He's just a little less exciting, a little less shiny to some people, but he easily fits in the tier in terms of expectation and years left with Kelsey and Andrews, and Kyle Pitts has maybe a few more years left if he can keep producing in a terrible situation anyway. But those would be my first thoughts. I've written this up a few different times, like what to do in a draft, and that's actually one of the projects I've just been given, like what's an ideal draft in a rookie draft for a Superflex league. Stay liquid, to use the Bruce Lee term. You really have to look at your draft, see if you see any trends, even by pick 11. Are they hammering quarterback higher or lower than ADP? That's the first question. Are they going to let Dak fall to the third or not? And then just have a priority list, a thing that you know you need to target. And that can shift based on who's left. Like, for example, the 7 quarterbacks go, and then the next 5 picks before yours, a straight up wide receiver, then, brother, you're probably taking a running back. Or you could take a shot on Kelsey or Pitts. Kyle Pitts is a fairly strong pick 11. In the extreme where too many wide receivers get taken. I could see you taking Pitts, just long-term upside value play, or you take whoever your top 3 running backs are. And for me, it would be Bijan Robinson in Dynasty. But if I'm going running back, I'm happy to take CMC and Barkley, and that's just going to push my team build in a certain direction. So you've got to go in with a variety of ideas, and if this, then that. But you've also got to change your mind and look for things that might be different than what you expected when you made that plan during the draft. But those are the key points to keep it simple. I go into a startup thing knowing I need to secure 1 QB, secure the bag. That's 1 QB in a Superflex that you are very happy starting every week, like really happy for a number of years, and then young wide receivers. But if the league's going to push you to running backs, don't be too scared of it. You can't really... There's no way to really be so good at a startup that you destroy everyone else's chances of actually being a great team. That's how I think of it. Another way of saying it is, if everyone's over-focusing youth or over-focusing wide receiver, they're just giving you running backs, and you've got to be willing to take that sometimes, because there are other good wide receivers. There's other good draft classes coming. If that's the case and you get pushed to running backs, take the running backs. Just prioritize those. If the picks are in the draft, prioritize those a little earlier. And remember, especially in a Superflex, actually, that's the other note. Like, that's the thing I would have on my list of things to remember while I'm watching my startup draft for the first time. Quarterbacks are never cheaper than a rookie draft. Like, as we know with this year's rookie draft, quarterbacks are going 1, 2, and 3. Maybe you take Bijan Robinson 1, and then it's quarterback. But a single rookie pick for a quarterback, even if it has to be a top 5, that's as cheap as they get. Outside of trading for someone like Brock Purdy right now, solid move, but you don't have the upside of it turning into be a Trevor Lawrence, for example. You're hoping they could be a Dak Prescott. It's a different path to success and dynasty value and hype. And the chances of Purdy being Dak Prescott, or Russell Wilson for that matter, versus Bryce Young and CJ Stroud being Trevor Lawrence, that's a much better bet. And so if the picks are in the draft and your league pushes you towards running backs or more production, then you might want to bump up your expectation of when you want to focus those rookie picks, because quarterbacks are going to be a little cheaper there, even than in your startup draft, which is the second cheapest that you ever get. Shouldn't do too many notes on this, but it's a really key subject. It's one I recommend a lot of different articles on and podcasts. What I would say is that second tier of quarterbacks, there's a gap. Late round QB used to talk about the U in auction drafts, but I also find a similar element of it in startup drafts where you've got people going hot and heavy for the first part of the position, but then it dips and lags, and then there's a higher price on the very last few in that tier. And so depending where the tiers are, what you'll find is this lag of value where everyone's like, okay, there's still a couple quarterbacks that I really like here. Dak Prescott, Deshaun Watson, Tua Tagovailoa maybe. So maybe I'll take a quick cheeky swipe at wide receiver and hope to get them next round. And then I got both. That'd be really cool. And so what you find is there's often a dip. So why you should prioritize quarterbacks, 7 go, but then you should be thinking about other positions. And then the next tier, the next part of the next tier of quarterbacks start to go. And that's where you really want to hope they fall to that early third round so you can snag one and use those first 2 picks just to hammer running back, hammer wide receiver. And then you'll set yourself up pretty well as far as we can do, as far as we can know about the future. But that would be my ideal. And then you're going to have to shift as the draft goes on. Sorry, didn't mean to go on about that one too long. But like I say, it's a pretty key, pretty long subject. I wish I had it bullet pointed out, but and I do to an extent. Heuristics are good. I've written that subject and many out a number of times, but the further I go, the more I find the paragraph works better than the bullet points, because the bullet points can be misleading when you're trying to make a decision on the clock. Yeah. Also, I would check out if you don't like mine, check out someone's Scott Fishbowl draft, because that gives you a much better insight into where everyone's idea of their redraft potential, because that's a recent, very sharp source of redraft ADP, basically. And it's free, and people have produced content on it. Now, the points are different than PPR in your league, but that ADP is actually pretty valuable, even if it's just in terms of positional value. Positional ranks, for example. See who your league mates might not like, based on how the ADP is falling versus this very sharp source of redraft value. I think it's pretty useful. Joe Makata, hey, how you doing? 12 team, start 10, extreme rebuild. They happen. I have Richardson, Justin Jefferson, Jamar Chase, Quentin Johnson, Bijan Robinson, and no one else. That's pretty good. I mean, you've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 players, but they might be 5. You might have the 2 best you do have the 2 best wide receivers. You have a wide receiver who could easily be top 12 by the end of the season, if he has the season we kind of expect. Bijan Robinson's already the Dynasty running back 1, and Anthony Richardson, I'm out, but he could easily be a top 5 quarterback by the end of the season with as much upside as anyone. But yeah, I get your point. You also have 524 first. Should I trade Bijan Robinson, and what for? Probably can't afford to hang on to him until I'm competitive. One, I wouldn't write yourself off, especially this year. There are so many cheap vets this year. Aaron Jones, Nick Chubb, Derrick Henry. No one likes them. No one wants them. In season, when who figures out who is a bad and a good team, those trades are going to be more possible, but you're also going to find the market is slimmer, which is great if you want to trade for those veterans, because there's only so many teams who are going to be interested in spending draft capital, any kind of draft capital, for veterans that are definitely worth it in season. So that's the window for that mostly, especially at running back. Now, for someone holding Bijan Robinson thinking they're not going to build, I would say, again, put a pin in it. Don't close your mind to the idea you can't compete. Because if you could win this year and be a building team, like that's perfect. That's a perfect score dynasty team, right? All the draft picks, all the youth, all the value, and I just won. That's 10 out of 10. That's really rare. So you never want to put the pin in that grenade. You just maybe I could compete. Maybe keep your eye out for it, being aware that you don't want to completely change the nature of your roster because you are on a set trajectory. The best time to trade Bijan Robinson is when you get the best trade offer. Right now, he's worth like anything. The max value anything should be is about 3 first-round picks, and 2 in the most recent draft to come. Now, where we're in a recent, really interesting area where you've had your rookie draft recently, the next rookie draft is 2024, so it's still pretty far away. But you at least need 2 in 2024, and because it's far away, you want you can't really make estimations of where picks are going to be. We get that too wrong. Again, that's why you should keep an eye on. You could be more competitive than you think because we get too much of that wrong because the season is unpredictable. But you want to make some assessment of at least one of them being likely, in your opinion, a top 5 pick. That's Bijan Robinson's price in a nutshell. Outside of that, if you trade Bijan Robinson on a building team, you want to have been done building when you trade him. Because if you're not, then it's okay. You've got a whole season to trade for some disappointing veterans or some point-scoring veterans. You've got next off-season to add some depth. You've got another rookie draft, and you'll still have Bijan Robinson, and you'll be competitive. So there's no real reason to rush it. But if you could trade Bijan Robinson and become instantly rebuilt, that's incentive, right? So if you can trade Bijan Robinson for 2 of your favorite second-tier wide receivers, so not Justin Jefferson, not Jamar Chase, but say it's T. Higgins and Jalen Waddle, A.J. Brown and Chris Olave. He's a top 12 dynasty wide receiver right now. That's pretty solid. You've completely rebuilt at that point. Now, the only problem is you're built, and now you need a Bijan Robinson. But the thing about running back is those points are available without having the dynasty running back, right? We know we can stream. We can have our J.D. McKissicks or Antonio Gibsons and make up that production a bit better than we can at wide receiver or tight end or a quarterback. But yeah, that's what I'd need. I'd need to think my team is finished building after this trade. But there's a generic value for you as well. Mostly, especially right now, I'd probably keep him. I'd see how competitive I am with Bijan Robinson this year. And because I expect him to be productive, I think there's going to be better opportunities to trade him to teams that are competitive, and he's young and good and everything else, in season when they know that risk is gone. Oh, look, he just put up 3 20-point weeks back-to-back. He looks amazing. I want this guy in my dynasty squad. You're probably going to find those trades a little easier to find then. And by week 3, you're going to have a pretty good idea of if you are, in fact, not competitive or can't be competitive. Again, with Chase, Jefferson, and Robinson, I think by week 3, you could feel the opposite, but then you've given yourself the opportunity to find out, Because you're building, you have the least amount of, sorry, I keep adjusting this camera, pressure on you about points on and off your roster, right? If they come, they come. If they don't, they don't. You also don't want to miss value windows right now. But I don't think Bijan Robinson's value can change or go down unless he gets hurt. And I think by week 3 is a fair risk, right? He could get hurt in preseason. He could get hurt game 1, game 2, game 3. But I'm willing to stretch it that far out to make a final decision, give everyone a chance to see how good he is. That's a bet I'm making, that he is good. And then I'll see if I can make a world-moving trade. But again, if you could get that trade now, do it, But that's my guess about when the best time's going to be. Howdy, John Bosch. Where are you when I need you? Playing Fortnite. Someone else, I imagine. A joke. Zach Harris, evening, Peter. Thanks for all you do. That's no problem. This is basically it. It's not a lot of hassle, and I appreciate it. One of my favorite shows in the fantasy space. Really appreciate you, Zach. It is awesome when Russ and Zach be here. Slowed by Wade. First comment, and now the next comment. Is Breece Hall a mystery? No. I would say we know Breece Hall is good at this point. It's just we're waiting for him to be healthy. And he's young, and you got to factor that in. That's where I'm at on Breece Hall. I'm pretty convinced. I don't know. There's a tier that you don't put a player in until everyone already knows. Like you don't say I don't think someone is Justin Jefferson, Jamar Chase, Travis Kelce, or CMC until they already are. It's just too small of a target to hit. But outside of that, is Breece Hall like a really young, great top 12 dynasty running back? Yes. Top 5 dynasty running back. Sorry. Yes. Yeah, I'm there. Do I think he's going to be CMC or those 2017 running backs that are still giving us difference-making points? I don't know about that because that's really hard to know until you know it. But there's a really small tier of running backs that are worth anything close to what Breece Hall is worth. And it's basically Bijan Robinson, Breece Hall, Gibbs. Maybe you could throw CMC and Barkley in there. I would, but some people wouldn't. We're already at the end of where most people would put it, So, yeah, it's very hard to say that Breece Hall isn't proven good, I think. At least to us broadly. We can always be wrong, but I think that's where we're at. Was the sample size big enough to warrant? No. I think backing is he a small sample trap? No. It's a fair question to ask, and I'd encourage you to look yourself. But for me, I think running backs show you who they are quicker, and so the smaller sample size at running back is less concerning, especially when it backs up a college profile and every tape evaluation I've ever heard of him as well. Like there doesn't seem to be a lot of miscongruity or suggestion that he's efficient. And small sample traps, while it is always good to just think about it, it's fine to think about. Always good, worth saying. I can get CMC or Breece Hall. Breece Hall costs an extra first. Probably get CMC, But if it's equal, Breece Hall's got the youth. That's fine. But it is a fair question to ask, is what I'm saying. Small sample traps are more when a player looks a lot better than they should relative to their volume in a small sample. That's the way I would think of it. Like Christian Watson wasn't just good. He was phenomenally efficient. He didn't just score a great number of points. He was phenomenally efficient in touchdowns in a smaller sample. Now, Devontae Adams has been doing that for half a decade, so yeah, he's good. That's fine. That's just a feature of his game. Aaron Rodgers, too, even when they're separate, both score touchdowns at an amazingly efficient rate. That's just a part of their game. Tyreek Hill is also fairly effective and efficient in touchdown scoring relative to the number of yards he gets per touchdown, for example. It's just part of how they play the game. Because we have enough sample, we can accept that that high efficiency is part of them. And a small sample trap to me is what you're saying is a perfect good example of a potential small sample trap. But it's more when they overperform and we don't have a lot of evidence of them doing. I would say Breece Hall didn't overperform. His touchdown efficiency wasn't too high. And his production wasn't that much more than we'd expect from an average amazing running back, right? So it's a good question. I'm not going to say solidly I know for sure, but that's where I'm valuing it. I think we've seen enough and it's backed up enough by other information that it is true. But, if that injury lingers, people are going to start to ask that question. And so it's worth at least keeping in mind while you're making trades or making the draft picks, then it's in your expectations as well. And so you're not going to be too surprised or too hard if it happens, and you're going to draft him or trade for him and an even better at a price or trade that is adjusted for that as well. I think it's a fairly good question, but it's not small enough, I'm concerned. Gavin Ferguson, do you think Hockenson can be productive as a top five tight end this year if Addison out-targets him? Yes. Yeah. I do think, and it is a conversation worth having at a certain point, that having so much talent on one depth chart can limit the ceiling of everyone or each other. For example, Jarvis Landry and Odell Beckham are my two examples in college where they were both doing really well, above average in terms of volume earning relative to the size of the team offense. But despite the fact that two had some of the most productive NFL seasons through the first 3 years, they weren't insanely above average in college. And my speculation has always been because they're on the same team. They're both huge volume getters on the same team, and so there's a limit in ceiling. And we've seen some evidence of that in the NFL. For example, Stephon Diggs and and Adam Thielen switched out who was a top 12 wide receiver based on who was getting the slot work and who wasn't. And it really took Diggs leaving to really show an even bigger ceiling. So maybe Thielen was helping him. Sure, I think that's basic rule for most good players help good players. Devontae Smith helps A.J. Brown and vice versa. But at a certain level, there could be the reverse of that, right? There could be more ceiling in Stephon Diggs if Adam Thielen wasn't there. Maybe. Or on a successful team, still as successful team without Adam Thielen, which is tough to do because Adam Thielen's a good player. All right, now that's out the way. No, I think expectation for Jordan Addison should be 600 yards, 17% target share. It's just going to hopefully happen in such a condensed fashion that it shows up on a per game basis that it actually provides startability. That's my baseline, right? It's not that he couldn't get 400 yards and still be good, for example, or you couldn't expect 1,200. It's just that 600 is like a pretty decent over-under line for a good rookie season. For example, last year, Garrett Wilson, well, you could say Elijah Moore was limited, but I can't remember the offense. I seem to remember other players being relatively productive on the offense, so that might not be the best example. Can't think of a rookie from last year that actually did. But yeah, tight ends can still be productive, especially where tight ends are much more touchdown based, which is something that's under talked about. The fact that Kyle Pitts is like a wide receiver, which I think is an exaggeration. Also, is partly because he's less, well, especially that rookie season where he couldn't catch a touchdown to save his life. He was a touchdown regression candidate all year. But tight ends sustain with 600-700 yards total for top 5 tight ends. But they have touchdown at such efficient rate that you're basically getting one every game in which they are startable. The other thing I'd point out is like that's a top 5 tight end. It's not particularly productive. Travis Kelce, the difference maker, is the thing that we actually want. Yeah, I don't think Hawkinson can be that, whether Addison is good or bad. So broadly, I think Addison should help Hawkinson, and Hawkinson should help Addison because they're both, I think, good players. With a quarterback who's proved he can sort of provide for multiple fantasy effective wide receivers. There might be a limit on ceiling in some theoretical sense, but it's far from proven. It's just a thing to keep in mind. So, it's worth considering. There are many things we don't know. But the reasonable ceiling, especially for a rookie wide receiver, means that there's still ample room for TJ Hawkins to have a top 5 season. But then top 5 season is also what we've basically seen from TJ Hawkinson most years. It's not suddenly 1,000 yards and 11 touchdowns or whatever. TJ Hawkinson is 4th because someone's got to be 4th. But honestly, Dallas Goedert. And if I get Dallas Goedert less, I'll take that Dallas Goedert. It's fine. It's also easier at tight end because you get to not care. If you've got TJ Hawkinson, don't panic. Like you're starting TJ Hawkinson, and that's pretty nice. But if you're thinking about going and getting a tight end, that's where it matters. That's where you're like, I'm going to go for Waller, cheaper, or maybe Evan Ingram, or those discounts, or I want to go up. I want to get Kittle, Kelce, maybe Pitts if I'm thinking value, or Andrews if I'm thinking production, like Kelce. And Kittle, depending on who I can get the best offer on. So Dallas Goedert and Hawkinson fall into that range where there's no problem, but you have to have a pretty good trade to think it's worth it. You know what I mean? Zach again. 12-team start 10 Dynasty, Superflex, 1-point PPR and a rebuild. Love Dubs, 24 second, 24 third, or Purdy, and a random 25 first. Purdy, I think Purdy has more upside this year than Love for a start. I like Dubs as a second round value kind of a thing, but the depth of wide receiver is strongly exaggerated, and that situation doesn't bode well for anyone on the depth chart. Unless, again, Love could be a lot better than I expect, in which case, there's a higher range of outcomes for him. But even then, you've got Christian Watson really did have a positive rookie season, despite the fact I think it was overly touchdown laced. So the answer for me is the first, and Purdy probably has more upside this season than most of the things on the other side. So I'm upgrading a second and a third into a first, even if it's 2 years out. And essentially I'm getting more points per game upside. And if that happened, more dynasty value at a Purdy anyway, especially in a Superflex, right? Yeah, Superflex. So easy the Purdy side for me. Kyler Murray, best value in all of Dynasty. Kyle Pitts was the worst value last year and still is. I actually think Kyle Pitts fell for a significant period this offseason, and he still might be there, and that's why I was mentioning it. In some leagues, he might be there. But yeah, Kyler Murray, I had to adjust my ranks just so Kyler Murray was, because I write a weekly article about how my ranks and everyone's ranks are showing where the values are, and it was just Kyler Murray, like by a significant distance. And so I had to change some things just to find some other values to talk about, to be honest with you. Kyler Murray's been consistently the best dynasty value, quote unquote, with upside factored in, and all off season so far. Yeah. Kyle Pitts, I continue to sit on the fence, but for the first time, his value isn't too insane. Like I remember rookie value Kyle Pitts was basically Justin Jefferson, Jamar Chase, and he hadn't played yet. That was insane. Slater-san, I appreciate the mini episode. Just to yeah. Sorry, I this is why another reason I need Zach and Russ here, because I do tend to run on in paragraphs, and also the reason I started scripting my podcast and planning out the video content I do, because if I get to talking, I think while I talk, and it's a problem. I'll definitely scoop out the SFB ADP and maybe make some other kind of multi-path flowchart for my first few rounds. Yeah, I'd actually recommend, because it sounds like so much effort, but honestly, it can be fun, especially if you enjoy Dynasty, of making your own ranks, for example. It's such a chore, but it's kind of fun to think about where you value players and tier them out, at least for the first 50, just the first 50 players. Leo Seeger, Leo Seeger on Twitter, he actually puts out a tweet thread fairly regularly about how he plans, and I think around the Scott Fish Bowl, he was literally talking about how he investigated his league mates this year. But he's also pointed out he specifically, and he wrote up an article about it, I believe, uses a flowchart method. Where he thinks about the draft and where his picks are going to be and says, and plots it out. If this happens, I will think in these two directions based on who is left. And if this happens, I will think in these two directions based on who is left. And it was a really interesting article because much like I don't think in game theory like John Bosch does, I also don't think organized. My thoughts, I think while I talk, for example, I figure it out as I go. Whereas Leo is a lot more categorical, perhaps, or categorical in his thinking process. And it was a really interesting way, to plan for a draft. If you've got a little extra time and you're interested in doing it, it's also definitely worth it, by the way. I like to do a lot of pre-work. That's also why I like vanilla leagues. I kind of like to know where I'm at without having to do too much pre-work, which is why I just work constantly, and that mostly takes care of me, I find. But if you're not just stupid and you don't grind constantly, taking just an hour or two at some point a week before the draft to do a mock draft, to think about ADP, to make a rough plan just in your head about what directions could I go, is honestly probably the best expected value for effort put in that you can put in. I used to say it's mock drafts, and that's kind of true, especially for something like Scott Fishbowl, but where startup drafts could be, it's all about who you're playing with rather than ADP, and it's less effective. So instead, I think that a little effort that you're trying to put in, just running your mind over it, thinking how you want to build a team, what your priority list might be, and the players that you could even think about this on a fantasy pros level, which is just look who's in each round and say and this is a tweet thread I've been doing the last few years. It's honestly been a good exercise. If I could have every player being fair, right? I can't say I get the first ranked player in every draft round. And also I don't want the 12th, the 13th, and the 24th player in every ADP selection, to be honest with you. So what player am I hoping falls to me? Just to run it through how my team would look and what build I'd be going for if I got my ideal, right? Who am I higher on in ranks for every single round? And do I like that? Is that how I want to construct the team? Because honestly, that's also why I've moved away from that. You shouldn't sleeper your way to a dynasty team. I like Rashad Bateman. I want Rashad Rondell Moore, for example. But increasingly, instead of focusing my draft on getting the players I want, although I do have a lot of preferences, the construction or the areas you want your value to be for different kinds of dynasty team is actually more important, which is to Justin Boone's point on the podcast this week. Quarterback, core of young, good wide receivers. And I think that's default for dynasty, to be fair. Like most ADP is telling you to get those two things. But then there's other types of builds, right? I've seen plenty of really successful team that's just like 7 running back thick. And they all have injury risk and they all have problems. But it's Austin Eckler, Derrick Henry, because they're all falling to values right now. Saquon Barkley, Aaron Jones, and you're just looking to pummel people every week of this season. And I worry about my value later. You can build a dynasty squad that way. And, you're just focusing value in this particular area because those points values are still tradable, especially as we approach the season. The season for those being tradable is getting closer and closer. So again, it's not the ideal, but if ADP pushes you there, there's plenty of ways of going about focusing it. But you'll get a better idea. And again, I'm giving you an essay. You'll get a better idea of where that line is for you if you do just rank the first 50 players. Exactly how many top 24 wide receivers are there for you? I've got like 8 wide receivers that if they're still on the board, I'm going wide receiver. That's it. I'm taking a wide receiver. They're just because they're part of that core dynasty ideal. And if they're not, I start looking at what the draft is doing. Oh, there's a lot of running backs laying around, and maybe I won't go that way, but I start thinking on the clock or just before I get on the clock, do I want to build my build in that direction? Is it going to be effective? How confident do I feel about the running backs I would take? And again, you got to make your own choices. But I honestly think there's always another successful way of building a dynasty team. Just depends how you are, what your confidence level with it. And for you, there might only be 5 wide receivers that are must drafts, or there might be 20, because, there are plenty of good wide receivers right now. But that's part of how you exert what you like on your dynasty team. Instead of going through, I want these 6 players no matter what, it's more, if these players are available, I am drafting them, kind of full stop, I think it's a better way to think of it, but maybe it's not. Fun exercise to run through either way. Gavin Ferguson, when do you worry about Cousins or his contract year and the volume that goes with him if he signs elsewhere? I don't so much. Again, I play Dynasty in a way that tries to isolate problems like this. And mostly I think players are going to keep being who they are until they get injured, as a default. Obviously, it's a lot more nuanced than that. At quarterback, though, their jobs are pretty secure, even with someone like Kirk Cousins. Well, Ryan Tannehill right now, he's done, right? Except for the fact, if you're looking for a cheap quarterback on a competitive team right now, Russell Wilson, who's disappointing last year, Aaron Rodgers, Ryan Tannehill, Brock Purdy, these players give those teams a way of remaining a dynasty. And if Kirk Cousins falls into that, where he moves teams or his contract falls, so he has to move teams, or some level of that situation, he's just going to be a different type of value. I'm going to try not to panic until it's done. And the other part of it is the only way I'm not thinking about trading down at quarterback is if I'm trading up. Because right now, I think the quarterback landscape is the best it's ever been, like literally the best it's ever been. So if there is a time to set your keepers and forget it, it's now. And so I've done a lot to make sure I've got Mahomes, Allen, Lamar Jackson's on my top, that 5 must draft list. I've got 5 players on my must draft list: Kyler Murray, Lamar Jackson, and obviously Allen and Mahomes and Herbert. I kept Burrow off it. Like, I'm trying to be as strict as possible with myself. Burrow should be great. He could easily be a top 6 list, or he could be on your top 5 list. I'm not trying to argue ranks, but I made my priority list for my leagues based on what I could do. And most of my leagues have those guys now. And if they don't, I went the other direction, and it's looking like a lot of Tannehill and Wilsons and Aaron Rodgers. And Kirk Cousins is always in the middle of there. And you're perfectly fine if your team is perfectly fine. If your team is building, I'd be interested in trading away with it as soon as you see the points. And if your team is good, I'm thinking about doing the exact opposite. Like, what does it take? What does the Justin Herbert team look like right now? What does the Kyler Murray team? Because he's on my list. And Kyler Murray's in a bit of a dip right now. That's one of the reasons I think he's one of the better dynasty values right now, because he gives teams in that situation an option. Now, to actually address your question, goes with the signs and the volume that goes with him if he signs elsewhere. That's an interesting way of asking that question. I don't think Justin Jefferson's in any danger of moving anytime soon. Dynasty is a year-to-year build for me, and the value quotient of it is about having enough that I can keep changing my roster. So if Justin Jefferson is set to leave, say we're playing in a 3-year window and his contract's up and whatever else, and he's going to Green Bay, finally, and Aaron Rodgers is going back or something, then hopefully I've got enough value on my team that I can start, and I'm worried about that, then I can shift Kirk Cousins for less than he was worth a year ago, and my team is still good. Like, I don't think you can start planning for those doomsday scenarios that far out. Yeah, sorry. Not gonna lie, I got on you about Watson after doing more in-depth research. I was actually turned off of him. I really appreciate the conversation, and I mean that. From whenever it was back when to wherever it is right now, I wish I could write a better line. Like, right now, it's a season, right? People talking about how bad Christian Watson is, or good Christian Watson, or how bad Sky Moore is, and good is. And where I'm a reasonable expectation guy, like, I know where I'm at. You know I'm down on Christian Watson. You know I'm down on Sky Moore, but I never come up with a viral way of saying it, or a way that is fun or memorable, for that matter, to say it, because 26% of the players we're chasing, Sky Moore could be one of those guys. I don't think it's very likely, but he could be. Christian Watson legitimately had a great rookie season. There's no way of taking that away. It's just there are pitfalls for that, and only 36% of players who have good rookie seasons really go on to be the great. And so you've got to choose your darlings a little bit. And his touchdown regression concerns me. That's it. That's a whole take. What I want to say is, you're right. I've been telling you Christian Watson's terrible for all, and now you know. But honestly, man, I appreciate you getting back to me. I'd love to know what you found, because it's not like I know everything, and I would love to flesh out my knowledge of Christian Watson. But yeah, just to reiterate there, best guess, more Chase Claypool, but positive rookie season. Jazz Fresh. I remember you. I agree with you. Geno on Kyle Pitts. Did I miss something on Geno Smith? Or did I say she was agreeing with someone called Geno on Kyle Pitts. That makes sense. Yeah. And Kyle Pitts, yeah, it really depends on the trade, but the first time he might be. I secured him in one league where my team could use it, essentially, for what I considered reasonable at the start of the offseason. I could go back and look at the trade, but it was not a lot. It was like Dallas got it plus something on a building team. I thought it was pretty decent. I think. Can't remember what it was. Nathan Lovejoy, 10 teams, start 10, Superflex PPR. Next move in a vacuum, Josh Allen, Joe Burrow. Oh, that's nice. In a Superflex, it's really nice. Diggs, Lamb, Amon-Ra St. Brown, Olave, Nuke, Bateman, Pollard, Charbonnet, Bigsby, Elijah Mitchell, Jerome Ford, Isaiah Spiller. I'm just testing myself on the names, you understand? Mark Andrews and Trey McBride. Okay, so running back. Running back's your next stop. But of course, the general rule is you don't need a running back until you're scoring points and you can make clearer decisions. And there are a few exceptions right now. Like I find Nick Chubb a little undervalued. Last week, Saquon Barkley could have been someone you investigated, right? Maybe they're really tilting before he signed that $11 million contract. So you're looking for windows like that. But for season proper, Aaron Jones has been a higher value, higher upside player. I found just generally, even in the offseason, he was an interesting trade to explore. Nick Chubb has been one as well. Who else did we come up with? Najee is usually undervalued, but it's still a really high value. And so it's hard to say, it's like you might sneak him in because top 5, top 12 Dynasty running back. So it's really hard to get him without a first round pick in the trade. And that's what you're looking to not do. You don't want to really give a first. Also, I think running back's your target. And you got to look at your rosters and see if the CMC owner sucks and knows he sucks. And hopefully you know him or her and have a little insight into what they think of the team. And if not, it's okay to ask, I find mostly. Most people are going to tell you exactly what they think is going to give them the best value, but at least they'll give you some insight. So the CMC owner, the Barkley owner, still maybe, who knows? Is Jonathan Taylor a value? But that's the group of running backs you would try to investigate right now. Outside of that, in season, you're going to know who is a James Robinson this year. You're going to know who is Elijah Mitchell as it happens. And so you're throwing out seconds, or you're throwing out wide receivers in a second to try and get one of those discounted guys. Or when teams realize they're tanking, taking CMC for a first and a good young wide receiver, or something that's fair, but still a lot more than you would give for someone like Aaron Jones even right now. But yeah, that's obviously, and I think you're just showing off your team, Nathan. Clearly you know what you're doing in Dynasty, but that's your concern. I have highlighted Tony Pollard consistently as a concern for me this offseason, but your team's good enough. This is not the situation I panic on it. However, if you have Pollard and you're looking to improve the team, that list of players, like the guy, depending on what you know of your league, they might be interested in the younger top 12 running back than the older top 12 running back. And I'd love to take advantage of that. And Pollard should be, according to Zach Reed, we'll take his opinion, a top 12 running back this season. I have a little concern, but it's a fair expectation. But he doesn't have the upside of CMC still, or Barkley, or Derrick Henry in his fire season. Derrick Henry's had more upside. Austin Eckler. Everyone hates Austin Eckler. Undrafted and old? You kidding me? Josh Jacobs hasn't yet signed yet. You might find a really interesting value there. Now, obviously, you want to keep Pollard because running back's what you're trying to improve. But I just saw you're exploring ideas to increase your points per game at running back. Specifically, that's your last piece. So I would I'd keep doing that. Genji. My bad. Sorry. It made a lot of sense after I thought it through, which isn't always the case because of how badly my brain works. Gavin Ferguson, how would you rank Quentin Johnson, Dotson, Watson, and Ayuk? Interesting question. Let's see. I think I have. Well, obviously I have ranks, and I'm pretty sure because that's the way I feel. It's Quentin Johnson, Ayuk, Watson, Dotson. Relative to ADP, Dotson's a really interesting value. But if all four, 1, 2, 3, 4, hit their ceiling, Dotson's the worst. And if all four hit their floor, Dotson's the worst of the four. However, I would say Dotson's more likely to hit his floor than Quentin Johnson. So if you're talking about risk management, that's fair. And so you could re-up that order. I just want to highlight Dotson here because sometimes he trades for a song in Dynasty leagues, but he ran a lot of routes last year. But basically the only two players I really would target heavily, Quentin Johnson, I think he's a great prospect from this rookie class, and I think he's set up to really succeed. So we're going to know pretty quick outside of injury. And Ayuk. Like Ayuk's top 24 wide receiver, no problem. And we've got that rookie season where he had that potential, right? I didn't get fooled by it, by the way. Like one of the few guys who didn't say he should be drafted in the 4th round that offseason. But it was a hard argument, again, where I missed a reasonable expectation. I squirmed real hard, but I will try and come down to a firm conviction while I won't say it firmly or as a viral meme or tweet or just tell you it's completely impossible and then seem to be prophetic afterwards. I did say it strongly. I'd rather Debo than Ayuk. I would draft Debo over Ayuk, which at the time was like a 5, 6, 7 round difference. And so that's as strong as I could say it. Having said that, I squirmed a lot because Ayuk was seriously good that rookie season, and that meant a lot. And he's consistently been good, really good, relative to his situation, his volume, and his role on that team. And the team's rolling into a new situation this year. And Debo's once again the monster truck with the constitution of a sports car or an F1 car, I think is the way Rich Harbaugh said it once. Debo's got more upside than pretty much every wide receiver, or as much upside as every wide receiver, and all the downside and risk of every running back. Like that's Debo at the wide receiver position. Ayuk's not that. He's not Karen Johnson, which is his physical metrics made some comparisons to that type of wide receiver, but he's phenomenally good. And when that team's rolling, if he's the guy, he has more upside than he's shown still. 4th year is a rare breakout year, but 2023 is the type of year where we should expect some of those rarer breakouts, like Amari Cooper last year was a little rarer. Top 12 after year 3, a little rarer. It's not amazingly mind-blowing, and it wouldn't be amazingly mind-blowing if Ayuk hit top 12 for the first time next year. You'd be like, oh, yeah, well, that's a surprise, but I'm not astonished. And so Ayuk's fairly high on my priority list as well. For teams that I'm interested in points, Ayuk's more interesting. On teams just generally in a vacuum, Quentin Johnson's the most interesting. And the other two, trying to be positive on Christian Watson, but unless he's seriously undervalued in that trade or that draft pick, I'm not taking the Chase Claypool swing. But again, I'm trying to be reasonable. He could easily continue to be good. He should continue to be good at the NFL level. I just think that level of volume won't scale up, you know. And Dotson, that level of volume will continue. He ran like 30 routes a game in his rookie season. It's really impressive. His targets per route rate will come up, sure, but he'll also never get to a rate like Christian Watson had last year, or Ayuk's had for his whole career, or Quentin Johnson should if he hits this year. And so he's just one of those perpetually good, like a Romeo Dubs bet. Like that guy can do stuff in the right time through the right stretches of a game, a top 36 wide receiver who you're going to find startable. And that is a good expectation. I don't want to undervalue that. It's just It's not really what we're hunting, but for free or for way cheap, I'm really interested in it. And Montgomery. Nathan. David Montgomery. Oh, your running back room's a little better then. It's still not bad. With Pollard, you've got your starter, clearly. Charbonnet, Bigsby this year. Could easily say, at least by mid-season, you're rotating them to create a running back too. I can see that. Elijah Mitchell has that upside, has that path to volume. So does Ford. Isaiah Spiller, we're probably done with. And also check your waiver wire for the other sleepers. Like you've got plenty here. Clearly, you know what you're doing. Keontae Ingram, someone I liked a lot from last year, so probably not going to work out. But he's on the Cardinals depth chart. And I've just heard a few news reports and seen enough sharp players picking him up. I'm like, oh, a chance to like the sleeper I liked from last year for free. And I actually found him on the waiver wire in a couple. If you got a free roster spot. But yeah, look for any other player like that. Like sometimes you just find a pretty decent rosterable depth running back on the waiver wire. You were right. I traded him for Diggs. I think that's solid, even if Watson's good. Like, so few have Diggs upside. Like, it's Diggs, and you've got Tyreek Hill above him, and you've got Devontae Adams above him, and Justin Jefferson. Sure. But, like, there's not a lot above Diggs, right? It's nice to bet on youth, right? And the dynasty mindset pushes you in that direction. But, like, a couple years of Diggs is the same for me as a career of any other wide receiver, right? Even if they're really good. Like a career of CeeDee Lamb or a couple more years of Diggs. Honestly, give me Diggs. That's difference making. It helps me win, at least in those 2 seasons. And if I win for one of those seasons, I've paid off my league for 5 seasons. So, yeah, anyway, there's one way of thinking about it. I think Diggs, Hill, the older wide receiver, even Adams, these are expensive older wide receivers. Now, the cheap young older wide receivers are also interesting. Michael Thomas, Keenan Allen. I really like throwing cheap offers on them right now. There's no chance in my leagues, but they're interesting ads for like second and you get a third back or something like ridiculously stupid. Even Hopkins is worth like 2 seconds. I heard the Dynasty Trade Calculator podcast say this week, but Keenan Allen's got to be worth just 1, right? Or less. And Michael Thomas got to be worth 1 or less. And they're really good. And bets this season in terms of that volume upside, that startability for a team that needs it, and maybe a return to top 12 upside. But then you've got those vets in the top 12 this year. Like for competitive, it's just a really good year to be a competitive team, to know that you can go all in. Because running back is really where you want to be by the end, but we're not there yet. But we still have Adams and Stephon Diggs and Tyreek Hill. Even AJ Brown, he's in a cohort of wide receivers with like Garrett Wilson and Olave and CeeDee Lamb and Jalen Waddle. And the AJ Brown owner, unless they're really sharp, thinks they're worse because they're slightly older. And that's not how it works to me. Like age itself doesn't add to the value, doesn't make them better, you know? I just want those players. Again, those 8 players are the ones I think will continue to have that in their range of outcomes, not because they're all phenomenally young. Anyway. It's a little more complicated than that. For example, you're never going to get out of Devontae Adams for what you have to trade for him right now. Whereas AJ Brown, I mean, even if he has a bad season, you're probably still going to be able to trade him for the same thing this time next year. He's not outside of his value arc. So it can be slightly more complicated. Genji says he's dead, and we say rest in peace. My goodness. I think Diggs for Watson's phenomenal. No Debo plans with Hardman from Soleil. I'm trying to understand that. Oh, he's talking to Genji. Okay. I thought you were going to talk about McCall Hardman. I think it's relatively interesting for those upside weeks. You know, one of those wide receivers could end up in the top 36. And 9 out of 16 games, he does nothing. But those other games, he's top 5. And what McCall Hardman's range of outcomes has always been. Just popping in to say JSN season for no reason. 1, I appreciate it, Zach. And 2, there's a very good reason. It's JSN season, baby. And watching Reed's tape really scared me. He just jumps off the routes tree, man. He jumps off the route tree. I like Watson. I'm not saying he's terrible, but how you describe it is exactly, yeah. And I think that's fair, right? If you've got Watson, that's pretty cool. But if you can get Stephon Diggs or Tyreek Hill or, one of the, yeah. Why reiterate what you've already said? Well, I haven't watched any Jalen Reed team, obviously. I didn't see Deontay, a Scary Terry type, ready to produce. And also Dubs was Jordan Reed. Jordan Love? Where's the name Reed coming from, man? All I can think of is Jaden Reed. Was injured. There's a lot more comps. I still think Watson is good. People draft him as a wide receiver 2 or 3. Yeah, he's a great wide receiver 2 or 3. You know what I mean? I get it. He's more a 4. Now, I would say I'm comfortable with him as a 3 just because of the youth and upside and stuff. And, good rookie seasons are hard to come by. I mean, Alec Pierce, we're peering at Alec Pierce and Dotson and thinking, the routes look pretty good. Whereas Watson was putting up points. It's rare. Ayuk was rare year 1 too. But yeah, anyway. Don't need to belabor this point. A 4 would be great. If you draft him as a wide receiver 4, you're laughing, Gavin Ferguson. See, that's where I want to set the line. I don't want anyone not to take him as a wide receiver 4 because I said he can't happen. Because you probably shouldn't happen. But as a wide receiver 4, give me that bet all day. I don't want to shush anyone off that level of, give me Watson. That's awesome. Gavin Ferguson, I don't think you understand my question. Okay, sorry. Let's try again. I own Jefferson and Cousins, and Cousins is on a contract year. Got it. If Cousins signs on another team, Jefferson's production will take a hit, right? I don't think so, no. Because Cousins' volume is gone. Okay. Sorry, I thought you were talking about the way I described volume. No, I think, let's see. What I would assume, no, hang on. How should I approach this? I think Justin Jefferson's volume is related to Kirk Cousins. I think that's very fair. But I think the only thing we know that we can state strongly is Jefferson's volume is created by himself more than any other single factor. What does that mean? If Kirk Cousins goes, I still think Justin Jefferson is really, really good. I think he's a top 5 wide receiver. I think he produces in the top 12. That's where I'm at. If you insert Jordan Love, that's a little unfair. If you insert Blaine Gabbert, that's a name that came up for me recently, then yeah, I think he sucks. I think he takes a hit. DeAndre Hopkins is a really good example of this. He's almost quarterback proof, except for one season where he got hit by Blaine Gabbert and Joe Billy No Mates and just a whole plethora of terrible quarterbacks. And suddenly he was not Hopkins-like anymore. But he was still relatively productive and he was still earning all the volume because the team situation factors in, right? It doesn't matter how many targets you earn if they're all 10 feet above your head. And it doesn't matter how many times you catch those balls that are out of bounds if you never get to the red zone or close to the red zone so you can score a touchdown, because then you're going to have less yards and less touchdowns, and that's going to reduce your rank as well. It's clearly all interrelated, but I think it's fair to say Jefferson should be good with anything approaching average to above average QB play. The Andy Dalton line. Kirk Cousins is probably he's above that in terms of being able to supply multiple passes. But if you've got Derek Carr, I think he's fine. Devontae Adams was fine with Derek Carr, for example. And if he gets, again, Blaine Gabbert just to pee on a man that got first round draft capital a few years ago. Sorry, Blaine Gabbert, he suffered enough. But yeah, I think that can severely reduce your expectations, but not of the player. That just means they're going to be in Dynasty. It means you're going to be looking at a down season, but I still think the player is top tier because, like DeAndre Hopkins was after that, he was amazing. So it's no reason to move him down in Dynasty, but you're probably expecting a worse year if that contract year created a below average quarterback replacement. So you've just got to hope that they're able to find or go out and get at least average quarterback play for him to sustain. So yeah, that was a disconnect there, Gavin. I think Jefferson's volume is more created by himself. I think the way Cousins, or the best way of thinking about Cousins factoring in, is he's fairly decent. He's an above average quarterback, and that's what you need. And I think Cousins could also have a number of other things, like he's got a gunslinger mentality and so on and so forth. But Jefferson's particular game probably doesn't benefit from that nearly as much. His volume has come from, his real benefit has come from being a significantly above average slot receiver and then deciding to move into a Cooper Kupp, like they literally described it as using him like Cooper Kupp on the Rams, which is where you just feed him through the slot immensely, and he thrives in that environment. So with that, and that quarterback change could change how they want to approach the position. So that might alter his expectations, but my expectation would still remain Justin Jefferson gets the most targets, above average target share, and is really, really good. So as long as the team level can keep up, then he'll be fine. You don't need a top 12 quarterback or even top 15 quarterback to be a top 12 wide receiver. It does help. The majority actually do have good quarterbacks or above average quarterbacks. But it's actually possible to still maintain with below average quarterback play. It's like I looked at this once around the DeAndre Hopkins period, and it's something like 37, I want to say, percent of top 12 wide receivers have received below average quarterback play since 2008. But I can't remember exactly. But it's a smaller group, but it exists. You don't need Aaron Rodgers to be great. You need Tua. You need Andy Dalton. AJ Green did it for years. Purdy could be perfectly fine to supply a top 12 breakout year for Brandon Ayuk if the team is able to be successful enough that good players can help good players, kind of a rising tide lift all boats. Hopefully I'm getting closer to what you said there, Gavin, or asked, rather. But again, in Dynasty, my main takeaway would be, even if I'm looking at a down year, I'm looking at a great player. And so I'd probably rather ride the bad year than panic sell or anything like that. I don't think anyone's going to do that, NS, but appreciate it. But you never know. Christian Watson's touchdown rate will continue to be upwards of 20%. No. Obviously, he won't. But he could have an above average touchdown rate and increase in volume. He could do that. The problem is we're talking about, I'm also building in a below average expectation for Jordan Love, which is probably unfair because I don't do a lot of quarterback evaluation. And I'm sure rooting for Love to be great. That would be awesome for fantasy. That'd be awesome. That's the ideal, But, talking about expectations and waiting this long and stuff like that. And also his college profile just wasn't superb as much as I look at that, which is not much at all, but a little bit. And therefore, you got to expect below average to below average instead of average to, well, Aaron Rodgers was sniffingly above that, And he's talking to Gavin. I try not to eavesdrop when I can. Claypool back to Jet. That's fine. I would say my main takeaway here is you've got a good process. You should establish a firm opinion and argue for it. And hopefully, because there's no reason to be, we can be as angry and frustrated as we want, as long as you all realize it's fantasy football and it doesn't mean anything. And we would, all help each other out if we saw each other on the side of the road because we're all people. Like, being angry or fervent does not upset me about fantasy football. I know it does some, and I try and back off when I notice it. But that's what you should do. Establish a firm opinion. Defend it ferociously, but consider what the other people are saying. And then if you reassess, you are like, they've got a point. I mean, I was going to make a video about this, but I don't really know the framing of it. The last two streams, me and Zach, towards the end of it, have gotten in like disagreements. Like we just have remarkably different opinions on expectations for this season. One's Tony Pollard that I've already kind of signaled. I'm kind of backing off my hatred a little bit because he had a really good point. And the one before that, I think, was I don't know, the stream before there was someone else. And we kind of go as contentious as me and Zach get, put it that way. But I stepped away from the stream. I thought about what he said, and at least in Pollard's case, I'm like, he's got a good point. That's exactly the process for me. That's why I can be a bit of a dick on Twitter, because I think I learn better that way. Establish a firm opinion, argue about it ferociously, but honestly listen to what other people say. And if it changes your mind, That's cool. That means I'm going to get less wrong because this person was willing to argue with me. That's the process. And if they're wrong, I'm gonna remind them of it. But same in reverse, like never feel bad about changing your mind or disagreeing. Like that's literally what we're playing the game for, as far as I can see, to engage in the chance to disagree and then be right or wrong. It's meant to be fun. And I think terms like good, bad sometimes mislead us, but I agree with you, Genji. In terms of fantasy expectation, likely. In terms of, I really don't even know how you rate quarterbacks or wide receivers at the NFL level. Like, it's a Hall of Fame discussion. While I'm sure it's interesting, I mean, there's no way of comparing what Justin Jefferson is good at on a fair, even scale with what Jamar Chase is good at, and then saying quantifiably, this guy is. I know we're going to do that anyway, because it's fun, but where it doesn't matter for fantasy, I get to just go, no, I don't think that's a real thing. Christian Watson, good, bad? I'd say bad, but he's clearly better at something than most people. Just not the thing that we want. Maybe. Probably. Yeah, Stan. Again, it's literally just meant to be a game for fun. So I always appreciate someone willing to do that a lot now, especially where there are so many nice guys. And I don't want to mean to say like that's not a good thing. I like nice people, okay? But there's only so much that you can know, and so you're just choosing the voice that you prefer, really. And that's perfectly fine too. But like, part of this fun is meant to be just being able to argue a little bit. It doesn't matter. I don't think it means anything about your or my character, no matter who is right or wrong. I assume you're also nice people who, take care of your loved ones and, give money to charity. Like, that's all extra, right? I demand that from just a human. But fantasy football is meant to be a space where you can be a little obnoxious. Not at people, but with your fantasy opinions. We're meant to be able to give ourselves the suspension of disbelief that this is who you are, just a little bit. Just because it's fun to be contentious. It's fun to think, I know the future better than you know, even though we both recognize in reality, like, neither of us are guessing the future, or neither of us know the future. We're mostly guessing, and sometimes we get it right, and sometimes we get it wrong. I don't know. I don't want to go too far down that road, because it leads to a road where people justify being a terrible human being, and I don't want to encourage that. But for people just honestly trying to engage in a discussion, it's okay to be contentious. Like, I think it's necessary. I also think it's a necessary muscle to flex socially, because we're all generally trying to be good people. But it's important to be able to be contentious when you need to be. You know what I mean? That's actually one of the reasons I started doing content or enjoying the conversations, because I'm naturally confrontational avoidance person. But sometimes I need to tell someone in the real world that they need to get off their ass and work. And because I was always avoiding conflict, even when I wouldn't. And I like stretching that muscle a little bit. Sometimes it's necessary. In a good way, in a good positive way, not to hurt people, but sometimes you need to hear a hard truth. Sometimes someone in charge or with power needs to know from a voice they trust firmly that they just did something that was bad. There's no wiggle room. There's no, you couldn't have known. You just did something that was bad, and I am sad that you did that. And socially, where I find, at least myself, I'm trying to be a nicer and better person in real life. Fantasy gives me the chance to stretch that being contentious muscle a little bit. I'm talking about this too much, but I find it an interesting part of the game. As long as everyone's nice to each other for reals, then I'm fine. But yeah, I enjoy the arguments, and I think it's an important muscle to stretch. Sometimes you need to say something firmly. Doesn't mean nastily, but it does mean firm. Who did I like pre-draft now? Jaden Reed. I liked him a little bit pre-draft. He fell out of my process. I mentioned him again purely because late round QB shouted him out, and I was like, I swear I said something positive about that guy, because late round QB's got a pretty good hit rate, and I want more hits on my record. But honestly, he kind of faded out of my process the further I got on. But I can show where he's slightly above average relative to his conference, so he stood out to me fairly early. But nowhere near the hype he's suddenly started to get. I think Rashi Rice, Marvin Mims, and Josh Downs all stood out much more clearly from my own personal process. Josh Downs particularly. But Jaden Reed doesn't look bad. I've just become sensitive because, Deontay Johnson, Darnell Mooney, they didn't look bad in my process, but they didn't highlight in my process either. And so I've become more sensitive to when I hear a good opinion like Zach or literally JJ Zachariason mention someone. I'm like, oh, maybe this is a thing. I should tell people that this is what he looks like in my process too. Some of that's just content, to be fair. Yeah, I can't say I ended up with any of them, but he definitely doesn't look bad. Yeah. I tried for Barkley, but the only ones sell. That's it. The owner of McCaffrey and Eckler is a bottom team. That's interesting. But won't sell for less than a QB. Crazy. And the Jones, Chubb, Henry owner is my top competitor. I guess that bottom team doesn't think they're a bottom team. But to be fair, that's a really good point about a league, They can say, these guys are dying on my roster or you're giving me a lot. They don't have to panic sell, as it were. It's a fair point. And I can't remember who your QBs are. But, yeah, you don't have to panic trade for them either, right? Maybe one of them will get hurt and it'll shake him up for the other one. Who knows? And again, this comes to, you didn't want to get them too cheap. Like, you want to give him fair value for McCaffrey and Eckler. What I think about in those situations is they might be willing to give him up for his value, not above his value. Because most people, if they've got Christian McCaffrey and they're a competitive team, why would I give him up to you unless you give me something that's way too good? On the opposite end of the scale, I think, and it works for me when I'm on the opposite end of the scale slightly differently. I'm not going to give him for a single first, but if you give me his value right now, I'd be happy to get rid of him because his points don't mean anything to me. Which is frustrating because then you're going to go on Twitter and you're going to read about a guy who just got like all of them for one single first round pick in Jaden Reed, and you're going to be like, damn it. But you got to work with the league that you've got. He's not an idiot, clearly, because he knows to value them. But again, that goes back to, you don't need to do it right now. You don't have the time pressure on you. Whereas every day they could come up with a preseason injury or hold out. Right now, running backs, who knows? Maybe they'll unionize or something. Actually, they have a union already, but you know what I mean. Running backs are always more risky on a depth chart than the proposition of trading for them later. So I have to wait for the team to turn towards tanking. Yeah, that'd be fine. I know what you mean. Sometimes the worst part about Dynasty, especially where at this point it's 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, and there is no off season, like it always feels like I should be doing something. And then when you look back, you wish you had done something. And so it feels like there should be more things to do because I should have done more things. And it's this circle that goes around in my head. But honestly, 9 times out of 10, the real answer is you're probably going to end up doing nothing right now. And the best option is probably doing nothing right now. And it sucks. It really sucks. I appreciate it. We all want to be playing Dynasty all the time. I get it. Which backup QB are you rostering the most in Superflex leagues? Bailey Zappi. I actually know the answer to that one because I looked it up. And I'm doing it intentionally. A lot of my most rostered players are not intentionally. That wasn't just a side comment because I end up rostering a lot of the same running backs and a lot of the same wide receivers that are free off waivers because that's just the way it works. But I'm not intentionally scooping them up. But Bailey Zappi is one I've put the effort in to try to scoop up this season in trades or waiver wire before his name became popular, stuff like that. And again, that's because of something we learned here. Like, I'm not aware of the news cycle, but Zach and Outhouse both mentioned the news cycle on him, and I remembered that, and I went back and looked, and college profile's pretty decent, pretty accurate, ran a little bit. I'm like, all right, let's go scoop that guy up. Charbonnet on a Dynasty contender. A hold? Yes. Yeah. I don't know what that split's going to be. And Rashad Penny is a case in point that he could just be literally a depth pick. Seahawks are willing to spend draft capital just to have depth at running back. Like, don't take that out of your head. Pete Carroll is always ready to spend a first-round pick on a running back he is not going to play. Could Penny have been performance or injury-based? Sure, but I think you're going to be safer if you just remember that. I mean, they literally spent a third-round pick, wasn't it, on another running back. I think Pete's been pretty clear in indicating, I don't care. I am going to spend draft capital on having backups. So he might just be a bench warmer unless an injury occurs. And it's a Ken Walker. I mean, Ken Walker's phenomenal when he finds a window and runs. You remember why he is one of the best rushing. In terms of statistics, as a rushing running back, he had one of the best scores in terms of rushing yards per team rush attempt. Is one of the things I looked at for my running back process. Like ever, he's a significantly good rusher. And from listening to tape evaluators, I know it's because not every play, like he might get 2 yards, 1 yard, 2 yards when you need 3 or 4, but then he'll make a play where he goes for 99 and a touchdown. He's a breakaway runner, right? And the Seahawks love that. It could easily just be they go full on Ken Walker. It could easily be a 60-30 split. It could easily be a 60-30 split in favor of Charbonnet, because technically, not that Pete Carroll gives a flip, because I think Ken Walker's pick was of more value than Zach Charbonnet's pick, but technically they were still both drafted in the second round. So there's no way of really gaming it out. So what I would say is a hold. But if someone gets excited and gives you more, if you have a hold player, yeah, he's also a trade away candidate. Someone's wanting to give you a first, you probably trade away, or first value, you probably trade away Zach Charbonnet, because the opposite of all of that is true. You know, it could literally be Penny, and you're hoping he gets to start in Philadelphia in 4 years. And trust me, it's been a rough road. Just saying. Trey Lance, I'm dying on that hill. I'm going down with the ship. Okay. I respect it, and at value, it's increasingly getting easier and easier for you, right? I think, appreciate you. I think something that's interesting is I don't think it's ever reasonable to factor this in later, beforehand. But later, it's fair to look back and say it's pretty clear the team is less excited about a player it invested this much investment in by now. Like, there's just smoke, there's fire behind that smoke. Again, the podcast I just produced, because it's on my mind with Justin Boone, he speculated about the locker room. I don't know. Trey Lance seems like a likable enough guy to me, but the locker room, maybe they don't get along, or maybe he's not encouraging. And that's where that kind of nonsense conversation comes in, because that can be self-fulfilling, right? You get bad results. Well, he's a little bit quiet, or he's a little bit obnoxious, so maybe no one likes him, and then everyone thinks that, and then they start not liking him because they think he's doing bad. So a lot of that is self-fulfilling as well. But it does start to occur to me, like, at a certain point, the team is going to just find an excuse, and if it's Trey Lance isn't good, it'll be Trey Lance isn't good, even if really it wasn't his fault. Got injured after having those last 5 games in his rookie season, right? Well, the game he came in and rushed for 1 million yards. Yeah. I know. It's like Justin Fields right now. Another podcast I've recorded but haven't produced yet was with Christopher Bean, a friend of mine, not a name like Justin Boone, but I really like Chris. I think he's really interesting to talk about this subject and others. And something we ended up connecting on was, I don't think QB wins matters, but I think at a certain point, you can listen to the team, right? Does the team seem overly happy with what they've gotten out of Justin Fields? No. But it is fair to say the team has not given up or is not blaming him so far. I think it's fair, because they added DJ Moore and they added Chase Claypool, whatever he is, and they went out and added things in this draft. They still got Darnell Mooney. But how do you split the baby there? You could look at it and say, I think the team believes in Justin Fields. And I think they do. And I think, therefore, the wins will come and they will be happier and he will keep the job. That's what I hope happens. But the risk is, and the better way of describing it is, they're giving him one last chance, man. If the wins don't come with DJ Moore and with a healthy offseason to practice, and the rushing isn't enough if it's not winning games, because that's what they care about at the end of the day. If they still think the wins are coming, it's fine. But the way they've built this offseason, it seems to me like they're giving him, they believe, they're definitely, they believe it's going to happen. But if it doesn't happen, it might get awful tense in the in that locker room. Not that it actually will be tense, but that's the way we'll describe it later, because we don't know these people. We don't know what their environments are like. I'm sure they're all the best of friends. I don't know. But it might be that post hoc explanation we apply to it, So we can't do that in advance. But I think it is interesting to keep an eye on. Is the team happy? It's a fair question to ask, even if we can never really answer it. And it might describe the risk better sometimes. That's why I thought it was interesting. You can still have a lot of hope. Points wise, he's perfect. His arc in fantasy production is like, oh, that looks normal. He's got top 5 in his range of outcomes next year. That's awesome. I love rushing quarterbacks. I love this college profile. Let's go. But then when you look at what the team might feel and the fact they were like, 6-11 last year? They may not be happy, especially with all the smoke about his passing accuracy not having elevated to the NFL level. I think that might be a better way of describing the risk, because it shows that the upside is there, but also makes you aware that downside's there too. I don't know why I'm going on about this. I don't know why I got Justin Fields from Trey Lance. Same problem, I guess. But yeah, ride your darlings, at value. That's important. Pete, should the NFL stop drafting QBs from the FCS? No. If anything, they should draft more. I actually do think the NFL should invest a lot more speculation in quarterback, because right now it's such a mystery. So I'm not going to say, and that would solve it, but it's enough of a mystery that clearly no one knows for sure what's going on most of the time. But it clearly is very important. So they should probably try some shit. What are we doing trying to increase our win potential through more certain cornerbacks or even wide receivers in the 2nd and 3rd round, or the 4th or the 5th or the 6th or the 7th for our special teams? Let's just draft or undraft, for that matter, 10 SCS quarterbacks, put them on the field in different sets. Now, there is limitation in practices, but that's why the NFL needs more of a practice squad option, to be honest. There needs to be a developmental section between college and the NFL. And I know that's never going to happen. It's just way too far out built. And the idea the XFL or anything is going to build this in-between league between college and, I think it's just hope. I don't think it will ever achieve or ever happen. But honestly, any efforts towards that, like getting FCS quarterbacks or just lesser successful areas of quarterbacks, but have lots of experience and they clearly have played at a high level relative to the country, at least, or the world, and not the NFL, at a high level, and just seeing who could be. That's what Geno Smith and Ryan Tannehill and all these situation changes and maturity and different systems and everything, all those different variables going in. That's what I take away from it. It's like Geno Smith wasn't that good, but you give him time to mature, a serious chip on his shoulder, and the system that just works and was willing to work with him. Josh Allen is case in point. Like, Josh Allen shouldn't have worked. He legitimately shouldn't have worked. But the team invested, that was a Trey Lance argument, enough that they were willing to do everything they had to make it work. Now, that doesn't always work out, to the point about Trey Lance, but it's also clear that success can come from places that are fairly defined as impossible or should not happen in terms of what's been going on so far. I'm going on for too long about this one, but I actually think much more experimentation should be going on, since it's clearly such a vital position on the football level, let alone the fantasy level. Sleepers, allowing each other to love sleepers is what we do for each other, Shimmy, looking to build out my wide receiver room and slightly so I have depth. I know that feeling. Give a 23-second and 24-second. Get Bateman, Rondell Moore. Yeah, that's a second for each. I'm willing to do that. Let's see. Olave, Wilson, Devontae. Yes, these are the sleepers I'm shopping for, and that is the correct price. But something I've been going on back in my head over and over again is what I know the better odds bet is that second for DeAndre Hopkins and Keenan Allen. Those, if you want to build out depth because your team looks competitive, Keenan Allen, Michael Thomas, DeAndre Hopkins. My dynasty brain, that's why I say these are the few sleepers I'll allow myself, because sleepers to me are about valuing the value, right? He's young, therefore there's more upside. But the chances that Hopkins gives you whenever he's playing value over baseline or points per game over replacement or usable weeks or however you want to determine it is much, much like it's actually really certain when he is playing, he will do that much better than that Bateman ever actually fulfills the prophecy, right? Or that Rondell Moore does. Now, if they do, there's more value. And so my dynasty brain allows me a couple down here in the second round value range. But if you're asking me about what depth should you build up, it's really Hopkins. It's really Mike Williams. It's really the older players who know what they are and they can do that. So I just want to throw that out there because I mentioned Bateman more a lot. And it's honestly like I've done it to myself. I've done it to my teams. And I believe, but I'm believing in the prophecy coming true. But if you're honestly just building out your depth chart, you're trying to get a better ROI, you're trying to improve a team, much better move 99 times out of 100 or 99 times out of 10. It's Hopkins, it's Keenan Allen, it's Michael Thomas, it's those old vets who, when they play, can be really good. You know, yeah. Even if they don't, even if this is the year they pull the red ball out the sack and they only play 3 games, those 3 games are going to still be probably better than what Bateman or Rondell Moore give you. So I just want to throw that out to you, Shimmy. These are 2 players I would do that for. Yes. But if you mean building out your depth and your team stacked and you're looking for value, you're just looking for good value, good wide receivers to add. It's the old guys. Thought I'd throw that out to you. But yeah, I would do that for sure. Instead, trade Jerome Ford or hold. Hold. Jerome Ford doesn't have any value. If you get value for him, you trade him, though, to be fair. Like if you get a second for Jerome Ford, take it. Outside of that, hold. Yeah. Watson for Diggs is straight away robbery. Man, I'm really behind. It really shows up how much I'm taking up the time on the other people didn't really get. Thank you. How many firsts do you think I need to add to Deebo Samuel to get Jamar Chase? Probably the value of Jamar Chase, to be honest with you. 2. 2 would be an overpay, and you might tempt them. Again, Deebo has the upside, but there's a reason he's in a different. It's probably 2 firsts, yeah. And I'll probably say no because they got Jamar Chase, so why wouldn't they? 3. Yeah, they'll probably hold out for 3. Sorry, I keep dropping my lighter. Imagine JJ gets Kyler. That's probably a quicker way of answering that. Yeah, you're just thinking about the downside. What about the average was my answer. And your point is, what about the upside? That would be, I mean, we probably have seen the best, but the best is pretty good from Justin Jefferson. We can root for teams to keep making mistakes. Adams QB proof too. I don't think so. I look, if Hopkins can't be QB proof, but is near QB proof, then that's probably the best we got, you know? And I enjoy making fun of Derek Carr as much as anyone, but he is in the average. Yeah, he supported multiple top 24 wide receiver seasons. I mean, in terms of fantasy, his results reflect a quarterback who's providing average level of service. To put it in a Yelp review type description. Could we take a second and just realize if that did happen, Kyler is now QB1, not even close. If Kyler... If you're dynasty brain like myself, or you want to get an experience of why Kyler shows up, just go and look at season-long finishes with Josh Allen, Patrick Mahomes, Kyler Murray, Lamar Jackson, Dak Prescott, and just put them in order. And then they're 22, the 21, the 23, 24. and just do that for a 10-year history of the top 12 quarterbacks and like even just conditional formatting. Kyler Murray is insanely undervalued for what he's provided in fantasy. Like he's already in that tier for me. Again, he's one of the top 5, and I didn't even include Joe Burrow in it. It's pretty hot. I'm probably too high on Lamar Jackson in some ways, and I don't care. I am not backing down to John Hogue. Like I'm asking if that's a great debate. I still wouldn't have him over Mahomes or Allen, but I would put him to the top of that second tier. How about that? Just for the funsies, to be honest. I'd put him in there with, well, he's already in there with Herbert and Burrow, but I'd put him above Herbert, maybe just for funsies. But yeah, I think same tier already, so there's not a lot of upside I can give. I mean, Hopkins is nice, even Hollywood, but JJ. Good players help good players. Even better players help them even better. I kind of like the logic there, yeah. Kyler's getting London and Pitts. You think he's going to Atlanta? Wow. That offense doesn't look set to pass a lot this year, so he could get even lower in value if that happened. And I would keep throwing money at it. Personally. Oh, I clicked off it. Sorry. You think he's going to Atlanta? That'd be interesting. I assume the team can't mess it up this badly. Like, Kyler's been really good, but maybe. Vikings or Atlanta, which is better? Either's fine. I would rather him go to Atlanta, right? Because if you keep Cousins in Minnesota, then JJ's fine. And if you add Kyler to Atlanta, then suddenly London and Pitts are looking better. And I like more good fantasy players. That's my thinking. Hawkinson, Addison, JJ, or Bajon, Pitts, London. Yeah, that's a real... It's a question. I think it's... I'm going to dynasty brain it and say I just want more good fantasy. I think Atlanta getting the help would create more positive fantasy outcome. I realize I'm talking about your guys' conversation here, so I'm going to move on just a little bit. It's a really interesting hypothetical, but we're obviously not going to know. It's one of those wait and see things for me. Appreciate you guys are enjoying each other's company, though. I'd appreciate it if everyone dropped a like, but it's perfectly fine if they don't too. There's no way the monetization of my channel is ever actually going to return actual funds. So I'm just here for the... I don't know. Have fun talking about Dynasty. Yeah, honestly. When I say good or bad, I'm more... Yeah, I know you are. I just like to talk about definitions a lot because not everyone is you, Genji. And believe it or not, like I have misled people by not having a lot of experience with me, but they see a tweet or read an article and then my definitions aren't stated and they make a mistake. And honestly, it is my fault. Like if I don't define my terms and I'm making content for people, I should establish what I'm trying to say effectively, or that's my communication problem. So yeah, I wasn't suggesting you're unaware of that. I just like to define my terms when I can. Who do you think will lose most dynasty market value by the end of the next season between Bijan, Gibbs, CD, AJ Brown, CD Lamb? Would you be looking to move tier down any of these players? I secretly think that Dak Prescott, CD Lamb, and Michael Gallup even maybe could ball out this season. I would love to see Dak return to the top 5 and the running back volume doesn't matter for Pollard as much because he gets a little bit more on the passing and they just ball. I would love to see that. But it's just a fevered dream of mine. And I think CD Lamb's top 12 season was of the okay variety. And just in terms of percentage of games in the top 12, top 36, top 96 on a week-to-week basis, I think there's a lack of ceiling relative to the players in the tier with him. Now, do I think he's good? Yeah, I think Amari Cooper's really good, and he's had that consistently throughout his entire career. He's still good. I still want to roster him the next 5 years. But if you're going to give me Waddle or A.J. Brown or Garrett Wilson or... No, Olave. I'd have CD over Olave. But Olave being in that tier is slightly debatable. Then I would take those guys. The problem with tearing down is that CD Lamb, I want him for the next 5. I don't see a big reason to tear down unless I'm just selling purely for value and trying to get more players. You know what I mean? I'd much rather add to him and go up. Like, get me Jefferson. CD Lamb plus a first. Does it get me Jefferson? No. Jefferson and Bateman or their favorite sleeper or a running back they love, maybe. It's a tough trade, which is mostly why I'd probably just keep CeeDee Lamb. But tearing down is not a thing I do with that tier of wide receiver, but he's the one that stands out to me there. Gibbs, maybe. Gibbs might fulfill the prophecy of, to use the same language, of Swift's upside. He really could do that this year. But he's the one I'm least secure about because I think he's just Swift, which is a really good thing. But like Swift is dropping 30 spots in positional rank right now because he's just on another team, and I don't get it. We seem to be so fickle with that type of running back that if Gibbs is just good, solid this season, does everyone hate him all of a sudden? But anyway, yeah, I'm not going to say I would tear him down. No, with both players, with that level of player, I'm more likely to go up or sell out for value. Like give me as many draft picks as possible. You know. In any argument, I know what you're saying. Appreciate it. Has Bijan Robinson value already peaked? Actually, I had this, or at least I said it to Ray GQ on Twitter. I can't remember if he responded because he doesn't respond to me as much as he used to because he's so busy and popular now. He probably doesn't have time. No. Can he be worth more? Probably not. But I think your league mates will be more willing to trade for him when he plays. Like we can rank him and draft him, and your league can draft him as high as they want. The value isn't, there is a ceiling to value when everyone thinks it, you know? That's why, honestly, that's why Justin Jefferson and Jamar Chase have a different value than the other guys, right? It's just everyone accepts it. So it's true. It's more true. Yeah, that's probably a better way of saying it. So when Bijan Robinson plays, so long as he is good as I genuinely think he is, then everyone in your league will be more readily accepting of the value. Right now, it is fair to look at Bijan Robinson's value, having never played, if you haven't looked at the history or don't have a reason to think he's phenomenal, and go, what the does no one remember Kyle Pitts and how we ran out that rookie to the nth degree? Honestly, I can see how a few could just be hesitant. I can replace my entire team right now with Bijan Robinson. Give me my entire team. It's fair. Value-wise, it makes sense. What that means to me is that a few of those teams are going to shift from there to, hey, Bijan Robinson's actually the Dynasty running back 1 by the time he is playing. So I do think there's still more ceiling in his value, but you're right that, you know, he can't get any higher in AP. I mean, he could be ranked 1 overall, I guess. But in terms of the tier of value, no. But I think in real terms, yes, I think we'll see a peak from here. And, you know, just because someone is at peak value doesn't mean you trade them away. Like, what's the point in trading the best player in the world away so you can go get more value to go looking for the best player in the world? You know, not that Bijan Robinson is the best player in the world. I was just taking it to an extreme. Like, you know, it's why I think old guys can be underrated a little bit for their upside, because at the end of the day, what we need is points. And we need value to get points, but we don't need value over points. We should choose value over point. We should choose points over value more as a default, if you know what I mean. I'm making no sense at this point. It's probably getting late. Unless we're talking about Tony Sky, Chigakonku, then yeah, they're bad. They're probably bad. No, those are all bad. All those players are bad for fantasy in Minecraft. JAS, Jazz? Oh, talking to Jazz. Okay, so I will ignore it. Am I predicting it? No. But there has been some noise on it. And where opportunity at quarterback is very much a coaching decision, you can't earn your way in to being the starting quarterback, you know? That the fact that has been some disquiet between the coaching staff and Mac Jones is relative. It's also interesting because they double stacked off a deep shot tight end quarterbacks last year, which is just a weird move, and I noticed it, which is why I was aware of Bailey Zappi's college profile, because I went and looked at him. I was like, why are they drafting this guy? Fairly accurate, and he runs a lot relative to his conference. And that just stuck in my head. I actually think Mac Jones has more upside than most quarterbacks in that tier. But so far, he looks like someone that they could just replace, I guess. But he's been fairly good. He's one of the few he's the least rushing quarterback in the NFL right now, so I kind of want to see him succeed. Like someone has to not be a rusher, I guess. And that's how I feel about it. Then they grab White and Eckler late. Take Sutton and Judy over elite running backs. Yeah, there's a certain point where that dynasty value, that dynasty prime, gets in our heads. It's the same way age does. Like, I got to lean wide receiver. Like, you don't have to lean Ayuk, Sutton, Judy over Christian McCaffrey and Austin Eckler, especially right now. We should be expecting breakout running backs this year. Again, not to point out, but none of you have watched my breakout running back video, and the numbers show. But what we should be expecting is breakouts. But the last time we saw that, it was like one Eddie Lacy, like a running back drafted that year with all the draft capital and expectation. And then it was like a fifth-year undrafted free agent and a third-year first-round pick who had been injured. It's not all 2017 when it comes to breakouts, And that's where we're at. That's where we're at running back. So Barkley and CMC and Henry and Austin Eckler, they are still the best that there is. It's not like, and Gibbs and Bijan Robinson, if they both do well, will be additions to, not replacements for. Like there's only 3 or 4, If they're both also good, that means we have 5. If Travis Etienne beats my expectation, we have 6. We're nowhere near full at running back. So there's more than enough room for the players that you like to be good. And CMC, Barkley, Henry are still dominant as all heck. And Eckler, and, we just don't have a lot. So, yeah, that's also why running backs are falling. People don't know how to deal with it. Sterling Shepard was a good wide receiver. Yeah, he was solid. Older prospect, developed route runner, lack of ceiling, but he's a top 24 wide receiver, I think, his rookie season. He's one of those data points where players that break out with a full role seem to predict a continued low-level full role, if you know what I mean. He was a 24 wide receiver with 20% target share, and that's all he ever was. It's my Chris Olave fair, but I think Olave is better than Shepard was. But did I miss a question here? No, I don't think so. I actually just picked up Lee Nichols because I was looking for more running backs because I had an open roster spot, and I noticed his name, found out who's a rookie and where he played, and I was like, okay, a rookie, sure. I have no strong opinion outside of that, but yeah, Dendrick Pierce is one that got mentioned to me a lot as well, but I think he's getting hyped. I honestly have no. I look up their rough stats, in my database or just looking up Sports Football Reference, but mostly they're running back earlier on in their career and they're on a depth chart where I'm like, that's interesting. If I've got a roster spot, I end up with a lot of those guys just by accident. Or not accident because I'm intentionally doing it, but you know what I mean. Not because I examine their profile. Tell you what, if you all never checked out Dynasty Planet, it's a really useful tool. One of its most useful tools is called Rostership, where you can sign in with your MFL or your Sleeper ID, and it tells you the percentage of players or the players that you're rostering and what percentage you're rostering them across your leagues. And I find it relatively useful because I get that question a lot. And then also just it's a way of investigating what you're up to, I think this, but am I doing this? I found out last year, for example, I have way too many sleeper wide receivers for a guy who's always complaining about sleeper wide receivers, and I made some adjustments. And running back, my most trusted players are probably going to be these depth guys. Yeah, Keontae Ingram, Mohamed Ibrahim, Myles Gaskin, Miami. I think Miami is interesting to investigate for those type of running backs. Pierre Strong from last year, Sincere McCormick on the Raiders, Cordell Patterson still on my depth chart a lot, Deuce Vaughn, Devin A-Chain, Jordan Mason. I'm still rostering him for that small spell he had there in San Francisco. Kenny McIntosh, that's the other running back that Seahawks added. I found him in a few waiver wires. Raheem Blackshear, not great. He's like really deep into his career, but if you go look at his college profile and then look at his NFL profile, you can see him putting him at usable weeks in Carolina if the right path happened. I've also still got like one Dare Ogunbowale share randomly. Benjamin from New Orleans Saints. I still have one share. I only have one share of Jarrett McKinnon. That's disappointing. And more Miami. Jeffrey Wilson is actually fairly high up there. So yeah. That's who I found. But honestly, I just added to the running backs that I find. Snoop Connor, good name. Dendrick Pierce is one that I've had recommended to me numerous times. I assumed he was getting hyped somewhere, but if you see him on the waiver wire, you add him. Yeah, you find space for running backs. Jerome Ford came to my attention because someone in the DLF ranks chat pointed out that we all had him too low considering whose backup he is and how the injury history has gone. So, yeah, it's just a backup running back. I have Bijan Robinson in one league, I think. I had the 101, and it's a team that I've built towards this year. I want to win this year. Like, that's the purpose of that team this year. And so I just drafted Bijan Robinson. Feel pretty good about it. Already taken in that league. I have Prince, too. Again, if you can't find a name or a rookie player, I go looking at the backfields and then find someone with like 20 receptions in their history or workload history in college, just someone who could take a workload at some point. Evan Hall's great name, but we're not talking waiver wire here. Evan Hall should be drafted in your rookie draft. 10 teams start 12, single QB. Are we accepting a mid to late first for Jahan Dotson? Yeah, I would trade him away for a first. Yeah. You would take Dotson over Christian Watson? I don't disagree with that, but I think I don't have to. This is the reasonable expectation version of me where I don't get to say anything in a fun way, Jazzy. But yeah, I would agree with this, but where Watson has higher value, I want to tell anyone to do that when they could have got Dotson plus a second for Watson, do that instead, But yeah, I'm with the sentiment. I get the TD and contested catch point, but route running and route tree, he was actually nice on the splits. Yeah, I can't break down stuff like that. I can say he was very effective. He wasn't just efficient. Let's be clear. You don't do that in your rookie season just because. Aaron Rodgers can make a bucket productive. I get the argument. I used to make it with Drew Brees a lot. But the fact is he hasn't made everyone that productive. So he's got something. Like Alan Lazard, Zach Pascal on a different depth chart did a similar thing. He clearly has quote-unquote talent even relative to this level. I just think the points are lying to us about the relative talent we're comparing them to. It's Chase Claypool, it's McCall Harbin. These guys are clearly, Gabe Davis, these guys are clearly talented even relative to the NFL level, but they're not talented relative to how we use it more broadly in terms of what a fantasy asset is. You know what I mean? That's my suspicion, and I'm, wishy-washying it to the grave. I would just say Genji, definitely worth checking him out, especially when they get a real QB. Who are we talking about now? Watson? Yeah. And again, if you're getting him as wide receiver 3, wide receiver 4, if he's valued as a late first-round pick, I would trade him away, but unless you're getting that first-round pick, like, sure, roster him, like a really good rookie seasons are pretty hard to come by. And again, there's the upside of maybe they get better quarterback play than we expect or further down the line. I thought you meant Elijah Dotson. I actually don't know who that is, who I'm high on as a Charger sleeper running back. I actually didn't know. Is that I don't suppose he's related at all, is he? Yeah. Roster running backs, roster more. Romeo Dubs is really the wide receiver one for the Packers, right? I think so in terms of volume. I don't think either are going to finish top 24 overall or have top 24 points per game. But yes, I think they're going to have utility in Dynasty for sure. Watson's got more higher upside. Like that 1 week he goes off is going to be much better than Dubs. But I think if I had to guess, Dubs will get the volume. Yeah. And I do because I make projections. So technically I have to guess. No, I think I legitimately think it's Dubs. Fair point. On some offenses, there is no wide receiver. But if we're literally talking who's going to get more targets, I think Dubs gets more targets. I think Watson has more better games for fantasy. Yeah. Superflex, half-point PPR, need a stud running back to lead my running back room. Of Pollard, Damian Pierce, good two names. Javonte Williams, Rashad White, receive Henry and an early second for a 24 first. No, you don't want to trade away first for running backs, especially right now. Instead, I'd take Javonte Williams. If you want to trade away first, add a first to Javonte Williams and try and go get the top 5 running back that you love. You know, someone's going to value his age. Is this fair trade? Is this trade fair? Yeah. If Henry's a guy and this is what gets it done, yeah, I'd do that. First for Henry, and you get a second back too. Cool. You know, I don't think you have to. I think there are other moves that might be better for you. I'd rather trade the second straight up for Aaron Jones, but this is a good trade too. Dubs wouldn't make many rosters unless he was playing special teams. I assume this is a tape opinion because data-wise, it's like Dubs is the guy, and then he gets injured, and then Christian Watson gets his volume but has a higher ADP because he plays a specific role, and that's the entire difference. So if Dubs needs to be gone for Watson to get opportunity, then Dubs is better. That's the way my logic works. But again, I'm not investing on this depth chart. I think he has the most volume, making the most. But you don't want consistency to the point. You want the upside. So Watson's still going to be a better fantasy roster, yeah. I saw Adams catch 2 touchdowns and go for 150 yards with Stidham. Yeah. In a single game, great wide receivers can do good things with below average quarterback play. I was mostly thinking season long, but yeah. Hopkins, again, outside of that one bad year, he still was phenomenal with decidedly Brian Hoyer level quarterback play, okay? Like, it's not like, again, he's near quarterback proof. He's just not completely quarterback proof. I don't think there is such a thing. But there is something pretty close to it. That's a good stat to pull out your butt, though, Genji. Kyler is 5th in points per game. He's everything that you could want in a fantasy quarterback arc. And it's not just points, like the concern with Fields or Blake Bortles' concern, if you want. Like, the team was winning with Kyler. Like, I think that matters too, but whatever. I think the team was pretty happy with the results, but maybe not. Maybe his video game play has just gone out of control. I don't know. I don't understand why people are turned off a situation can only get better. It's honestly, and I'm not joking, like we talk about the hype and micro markets all the time, and it seems like sometimes like, no, that couldn't be that simple. It's because of the tweet about the correlation between him and Call of Duty, and then one report that comes out that Hopkins was really disappointed in Kyler Murray's work ethic, and just to the moon. Those rumors go to the moon. Like, that's how it is. Now, the concerning part is that's honestly how self-fulfilling narratives can happen. Like, that gets into the locker room, then they start thinking that, then they start noticing things, and they add 2 and 2 and get 6, and suddenly he's bad because they've convinced themselves they're bad. There's a lack of faith, a lack of effort, lack of support. We can honestly bad faith our way into those kind of situations. So it's concerning, but I don't think it's legitimately because Kyler Murray isn't good. It's just because people are weird. We're a weird animal, man. Oh, I got a good one who is the Cooper Kupp or Jamar Chase, or like a guy that should be higher. than what he's getting credit for. Getting credit or being drafted at? I don't know. I have I'm a Ross St. Brown corrected. I'm higher than everyone now because I'm determined to be, but honestly, he's not undervalued. I don't think I have a wide receiver. Again, I think the wide receiver market is pretty set right now. Outside of everyone is too low on Jahan Dotson, on Jameer, on Jordan Addison. That's a guy I'm trying to be higher than everyone on right now, in that sense. But do I have where's my value section? Sorry, this sheet seems to be crashing on me. Hang on. I don't think I have one, to be honest. I mean, I think a lot of people's answers be Deontay Johnson, but I think he's more a top 24 wide receiver at this point. Oh, Mike Evans, Chris Godwin, candidates to be that kind of a thing in terms of, again, values relative to ADP, but I don't think relative to expectation or relative to credit. Wide receivers. Okay, well, yeah, my perpetual answer is Juju Smith-Schuster still. His ADP position rank is 47th. Find me anyone else ranked inside or outside wide receiver 45 with that many top 24 wide receiver seasons who's not currently a free agent, and I would be surprised. Yeah, it's my answer to that is probably Juju right now. Kyra will be booted to AFC. Maybe Denver takes another chance. Teams rarely trade good players with their conference. It's getting more consistent that teams trade good players at all, especially prime career players. I am assuming you're right, though. They prefer to go outside of conference. Denver got no shot at Kyler, no picks. I haven't looked at their draft capital, but that would be a fair thing to consider. Money is fake in the NFL, but draft picks are real. Isn't that weird? Isn't that a weird state of affairs? If either Russ or literally nothing free agency, I guess you could say. Yeah. I'm getting in the middle of your guys' conversation again, so I'm going to try and move on to a question, comment. Pete, I bet you don't have a share of Chris Rodriguez. No, I don't, because I didn't like his college profile a lot. He mostly got picked up in my rookie draft. Again, in my leagues, if a rookie running back falls to the waiver wire, whose name is discoverable on my fantasy league, I am surprised. Like, again, it shouldn't be valuable information to say roster running backs. But we are in leagues where, like, me and you guys are so extremely aware of it that any name like Lou Nichols is as deep as you have to go before you find a running back on the waiver wire. Whereas most leagues, Evan Hall could be on the waiver wire. Chris Rodriguez could be on the waiver wire. Like, it is because it is. Like, but it should be this well known. Like, these guys shouldn't fall to the waiver wire in a rookie draft. What are you doing drafting a wide receiver? Like, stop. Just draft that rookie running back. Doesn't matter. Don't know his stats. Doesn't matter. Didn't see him play. Just he's on a team. He's a rookie running back. You should probably draft him. I do want to hear what he... Did I skip over something? Sorry. I'm sorry. Yeah, I was ranting and raving. You're right. I'm really far back. Right now, I'm at 11:12. So I'm actually only 20 minutes behind right now. If you're still around, I promise I'm trying to catch up. Hi, contending team, Superflex, half-point PPR, need a stud running back to lead my room. I actually answered this a little while ago, so that's how far back in the chat I am. Yeah, without Zach and Russ. It's normally bad with Zach or Russ or both. Without them, you're discovering the real root behind why we're always behind in the chat. Hopefully you stuck around. If not, it does get recorded. And message me. Oh, you wouldn't see this, but if you message me, I'll give you timestamps when I answer questions. Why not gauge players by fantasy points behind positional leaders versus positional rank? E.g., Mixon is averaging -3 points behind the running back one. JJ Zacharyson said he did a pod explaining why not, but I can't find it. Why wouldn't you do that? I actually recently looked at that for something else. I was trying to gauge the percentage difference between starting the running back 1 and the running back 15 versus the percentage difference of running wide receiver 1 and wide receiver 15. And that's the stat I released in last week's podcast. And the difference was like 10% extra drop at running back, basically. Why wouldn't you do it that way? I think the only reason would be replaceability. If you're talking about Dynasty or redraft, to be honest, Dynasty, you'll be talking about long-term value or rate of, or turnover. In redraft, it could not account for the replaceability of points because of the depth of the position, perhaps, or it's not accounting for the positional, the logarithmic trend to the drop-off in points because it's not a linear relationship. That or something like that. I don't know. It's a little late for me to do math, but I think that's probably why he wouldn't like it. Well, it's a good too long didn't read. Okay, what's the literal difference? But I think it's probably because the relationship isn't linear. I don't know. I have a hard time fit my brain around that one right now. Yeah. The alpha you want in Green Bay is Luke Musgrave. Then we don't want alphas on some teams. Again, what was the stat? 3 or 4 teams every year produce multiple top 24 wide receivers. In fact, even more than that, produce multiple top 36 flex assets if we include tight end into the mix. Essentially, it boils down to about half the league not producing a top 24 wide receiver or a top 12 tight end. So we need some teams to be terrible. Don't laugh at me. It's true, and you know it. You know he's insanely undervalued. I mean, if you want to go a little bit higher, Marcus Brown is also in that tier. Tyler Lockett, but he's in the old guy range, so he doesn't count. What is dead may never die. He never died, though. Jesus. Everyone forgets. Now, I admit, he's broken my expectations every year. After his second year, he's never gotten back up there. But since then, his per-game pace has been top 24 pretty much every year when healthy, when on the field. Obviously, he didn't play more than 5 games in 2021, but in 2020 and 2022, and even 2019, his points per game, second half of the season in 2019, was top 24, it was top 24, if I remember right. Which young QB are you most excited to see play and why? I'm actually interested to see Young because he looks the part against the SEC. Young had one of the best QBRs or accuracy ratings in that final season. I'm really interested to see Stroud because Stroud is the 3rd QB drafted in this draft class. I actually think he and Young are comparable prospects in terms of likelihood of success, in terms of their ceiling. I love Young, don't get me wrong, but Stroud isn't that far off. And you're getting him later. So I'm really interested to see what he can do. Houston's a depth chart that no one's excited about, including me. But, I mean, it's not nothing. And Stroud could impress and drastically change his stars in terms of dynasty value. But yeah, where I don't watch anyone play, obviously the answer is no one. Sorry, that was meant to be the answer. I forgot. I liked the like button. Appreciate you, Mr. Scampers, and welcome back. Nice to see you. Have you looked into Whopper for Dynasty? It's a difficult question. Yeah, I've been playing around with Whopper, weighted opportunity score, which is target share weighted by their IAR share. Since the stat was invented, I'm that old. I was here when Josh Hansmeyer rolled out Whopper. I actually remember the conversation between him and AD and HD where I think they brainstormed the idea. They both independently came up with it. And I think I remember seeing that conversation before. It was like an accepted acronym. But yeah, it's really good, especially if you're doing projections. The year after that is when I built my first projection model, and I specifically did it in a way that was going to use air yards because no projection model was using air yards yet. And Whopper was a big part of that. It's really good. It's really sticky because target share is sticky and your share of the offense is sticky and your ADOT is relatively sticky to the wide receiver, which means Whopper is so sticky. But also it does it's more useful talking about the value of their likely opportunity because we're weighting in an aspect of that value, their total air yards. And you just have to get the team volume right is still the trick, though, so it didn't do a lot outside of that. Rate My League put my team in the Scott Fishbowl 5th overall in my division, by the way, which I took personally. I took that personally. I'm just saying. Rating apps always put me mid, though. I don't know what to tell you about it. Yeah, Whopper is incredibly sticky relative to volume stats, yeah. Will Davis, yes, make the trade for Dolcic. Did I miss one? Yes, you should definitely trade for Dolcic. However you say his name, and apologies that I say it wrong, but yeah, definitely trade for Dolcic. He's the best sophomore tight end to trade for right now. McBride's a little cheaper, but I'd still rather Dolcic just because of his rookie performance was better. And Trey McBride's didn't exist. Oh no, I'm sorry. I meant Whopper, weighted opportunity rating, right? Warp. Oh, okay. So it's not. Oh, there's too many acronyms. Weighted opportunity. No, that's it, right? Whopper is weighted opportunity ratings. Wins over. Nope. The only acronym I've got here that's not weighted opportunity rating is Wireless Outdoor Router Protocol. So wins over replacement player. Okay, no, I've never looked at that. No. Nope. I've looked at EP, which is a better version of what that's trying to do, which is a level of how much they were adding to the team's win probability in a real football sense on a per attempt basis. And that's actually really good too. I've never looked at wins over replacement player in general. If you're talking about fantasy points, it would be interesting, but honestly, I think value of a baseline is mostly covering it because it adjusts for a per game basis, and you can do it with season-long numbers instead of using weekly data. So you see, I might be really far behind in the chat, but that's because if I catch up, I just have to sit here looking like an idiot forever. 12-team Superflex, half-point PPR, trade Rondell Moore for Dolcic. Yes, I like Rondell Moore a lot, but probably take the shot on the tight end at this point. Yeah, it's kind of even, but Dolcic, and I would make a decision. Yeah. I'm at the end, guys. So if you got nothing else, like I will take the opportunity to leave before midnight. And sorry to be really far behind there, guys. Like I say, that's just telling the story that I am secretly always the problem on the Dynasty grind. I'm why we're always behind in the chat. I am too wordy, and everybody knows it. Anyway, next week, Zach or Russ, or maybe in one far off dream state, we'll see both. We'll be back, I hope. There were very legitimate reasons why both couldn't make it tonight. So it's, absolutely no problem, not their fault. And I know, I like spending time with you all by myself. That's fine by me. Outside of you having to put up with me being so far behind in the chat, it's fine. Who's your favorite team? I don't have them. I used to say the Colts, but because it's a fairly close team, I suppose you could say Cincinnati. I don't have a favorite team, though. Genuinely, I'm a player fan. I'm as much of a fan of AJ Brown now as when he was on Tennessee. I know that's anti-sports in a way, but you got to remember, I came into this sport particularly as an outsider in general because I didn't grow up watching it. I didn't start watching it and therefore play Dynasty. I literally came in through the player level, falling in love with the value over replacement, honestly, of Arian Foster and undrafted free agents and the edges that I found. And then I came in learning about players instead of teams. I didn't grow up in an area where we supported or wore colors. I did with soccer, but actually looking at football, your American football through this lens has made me look back on my teaming in other sports and realized I always aren't we all fans of the players, not the broom that replaces the handle every 3 months and the head every 12 months? Like the team is ever changing. I get it. But players, like they're people and they're phenomenal at certain things. And I get a great deal of enjoyment and excitement watching them being able to do these amazing feats on a football field. And when they win and when they lose, like that's the suffering and joy that I'm really following along with. I'm empathizing with the people, not the ethereal concept of the organization. But yeah, I mean, everyone, when you grow up with football and you end up supporting the Steelers through all those iterations and all those broom heads and all those handles, I understand it. Don't get me wrong. So I did that with English football teams and English football team, not to mention our national team. But at this point in my life, that's spread to everything. Like I like athletes. I like players. I no longer really root for teams and so on and so forth so much. Got Sean Watson for Condre and a 24 fourth. That's a steal. Yeah. In terms of what you're going to get this season, that was infinitely worth it. Condre is a decent running back, and a fourth is nothing. But Condre is basically a second round pick and a good shot for it too. That's a great change. Olave or Devontae Smith? Smith for me. Smith and Olave could both be in that. That second tier at wide receiver is getting awful thick, isn't it? Especially when you force in DK Metcalf, because he should be in there as well. 12-team Superflex. Should I trade Dak, DK, and a 25 first for Hurts? No, I wouldn't. I mean, Hurts is fine. If you want your guy, get your guy, and that trade is. But even then, just know you're overpaying. Dak is worse than Hurts, fantasy-wise. Shorter career, less upside, but he still has really good upside, top 5 upside in a single season because he's been there before, and that's really what we're looking for with top 5 upside. And DK is, again, top 12 wide receiver. They're not as common as everyone thinks, even if that tier is getting awful thick. And he got a 25 first. If you're looking for a positional advantage next year, like that's a next little thing that you need, then yeah, Hurts is the one that gives you that. But value-wise, I think you're doing more and have solid value across the board if you take the DK Dak on the first side. But it's pretty fair trade, pretty even. Yeah, but now to which side? No, I mean, find the definition. All right, guys, I'm going to get at it. Again, I'm sorry, it's just me. Sorry, I'm always behind in the chat and I have terrible answers and I'm not a son. But I really enjoyed seeing you all. Saints have 4 tight ends now. What a mess. I was hoping Juwan Johnson would build on last season. Still good. And they have Juwan Johnson, Taysom Hill. Can we count him? I guess. And Jimmy Graham. Oh, God, I did want to talk about that. Jimmy Graham signing. There was someone else signed. Didn't the Chargers sign someone? Foster Moreau, probably more. All of these are interesting for different reasons. I think Juwan Johnson's the most interesting for Dynasty. He did have a positive rookie season, relatively. But there's no reason the Saints have a productive tight end outside of they once had Jimmy Graham. And the answer is Jimmy Graham was just real good. You know that's the way I think about it. I don't think they have, like, maybe Johnson turns into a top 12 tight end again. And top 12 tight ends don't matter a lot. But yeah. I don't think Jimmy Graham's addition really kills that. I just didn't also expect it. Good night, Rayman. I am going to go, I swear. Pete, I know Josh Allen killed QB evaluation well, he didn't. He just made me face up to some things that I've been noticing. I think a lot of the things I got right was pure luck. I mean, mostly we're handling luck, but I don't want to knowingly say a thing is good when I know it's factually just a 50-50 shot, Anyway, and quarterback evaluation for me at this point is a 50-50 shot. But how do I identify which QB is good? Should we just rely on draft capital? I don't just rely on draft capital. I do a little bit. I just don't suggest that valuation is worth any shit. No, I did an episode with Travis May on the Dynasty Crossroads. I think it was last off season. Check that one out. It might have been early this off season. He's someone I turn to for quarterback evaluation. It used to be Slaven_22 on Twitter. He used to write for 2QBs. I liked him a lot. And Travis May, now it's just Travis because he's a big Devy guy and his quarterback evaluations are spot on. I also do listen to Zach. He, again, has a pretty good process. He was pretty confident in Jalen Hurts where no one else was, or no one else I saw was, for example. That's a big feather. He also hated Baker Mayfield from the time Baker Mayfield ever Baker Mayfield, which is another feather in being the correct cap. So there are processes that I trust. If you want to build your own, the things that I know based on that episode with Travis and the little that I've learned, it's accuracy with experience. So if you've had 3 years with 200 plus passing attempts and your completion percentage or your QBR, or whoever you want a decent stat that evaluates how accurately they're passing the ball, conversion percentage is an interesting one at the NFL level. And that's what you're looking for. It doesn't matter that they're old or they're young. You just want experience with accuracy, and that way together is the best overall evaluation. Talking to Christopher Bean on the podcast this week, he said QBR is pretty decent. Also, adjusted yards per attempt, which is AY/A. It's on most. I've got it, and it's in most downloads. And you're looking for their peak production. I still look for consistency of production because one good year at quarterback could be skeptical of it, but if they're good, especially, you can do a little bit of age adjustment. It's mostly accuracy with experience. So my problem with Anthony Richardson, for example, is he's not very accurate, but he threw the ball so little I can't even call him that because he doesn't have a large enough or enough experience to really say that accurately reflects how good he is at being accurate. Like his sample is just literally too low. And that's before you go look at his conference and his team, and you realize this team isn't really doing football things relative to how the NFL is doing it. So how fair it is to judge what he got in that situation is kind of up in the air. But that's not a positive to me. It just leaves the door wide open to all ranges of outcomes, which I'm looking for some level of certainty in one direction or another. And his is no, there is no idea. His draft capital suggests the team's going to try. We have seen in Josh Allen, we have seen that you can make something a good situation for a player, but we've also seen that fail. So basically everything is in his range of outcomes, and I want out. But yeah, accuracy is what you're looking for. We need a lot more examples of rushing quarterbacks than we've got, although it is building in the NFL. But I don't think that's adjusted for that as well. It's not like if you're a rusher, you don't have to be a good passer. No, Justin Fields was an above-average passer in college based on what I just said. So was Lamar Jackson. So was Jalen Hurts. And still, Fields seems to be struggling as a passer at the NFL level, but he was above average in college. So was Lamar Jackson, who hasn't passed much the last few years, but he was above average accuracy-wise in college. So like taking someone who's inaccurate but a rusher isn't the formula either. You still need to be a pretty good passer. And even then, some are going to struggle to elevate because the NFL is such a big jump. So cerebral position is the way Christopher put it. And I think that's fair to a certain extent because it's processing power at speed, which isn't intelligence. It's just the amount amount you have to decide or already have decided before you make a throw or decide which throw you're going to try and make. I can do it. It's not, but again, yeah, those are some features. Those are some things that I know are true at quarterback. That was what the episode was last week. There's some things that we can still use to evaluate the position and quarterbacks. I can have opinions on quarterbacks without having to believe that our evaluation of how good, quote unquote, they are at playing is above a 50% bet. Like, again, there's actually some data and arguments, like good arguments to say that Andrew Luck actually wasn't that good. I was more of a fan, especially at the time. I was more willing to fan than analyze. And so I don't remember it that way. But looking back, yeah, he kind of struggled. It was never Mahomes or Justin Herbert, like, put it that way, as a passer. Oh, yeah. Anyway, so there are some things we can know and use to evaluate the position, even if we can't. I don't believe my player evaluation is anything more than a 50-50 bet. Which is good, because otherwise Dynasty and Fantasy would essentially be useless. The way I play Dynasty is mostly leaning on the edge. There is a way to evaluate positions and Dynasty expectations without being big giga brain Chad who out evaluates everyone. Which is also why the best fantasy and dynasty and redraft player isn't an NFL scout. Presumably, it would always be NFL scout since that's a professional job. Yet it never is. Curious. Nah, it's probably because they don't play. But I really don't think that's the only or the best path to being successful at fantasy and dynasty. I think we can evaluate risk, expectation, and historical outcomes, and I think that does consistently better for us. But anyway, I'm going to get out of here. Again, next week we'll have at least one person back, I'm sure. And thanks for hanging out with me tonight. Appreciate it.